A first-class seat is more than just a comfortable chair in the sky. It's a statement. For Marcus Reynolds' seat 2A on Zenith Airlines Flight 117 from New York to London was the quiet punctuation mark on a billion-dollar deal. At 42, the founder and CEO of Onyx Capital Partners had just closed an acquisition that would transform a struggling robotics firm into his portfolio's newest jewel. This flight was meant to be his brief moment of decompression before landing in London to meet with his European team.
After reviewing the initial
The first-class cabin enveloped him in calculated luxury. The scent of supple leather mingled with the subtle notes of sandalwood from the moisturizing towels being distributed.
You can't just do that!
A gentle hum of the aircraft systems provided a soothing white noise beneath the soft clink of ice in crystal glasses. The passengers were a predictable tableau of the global elite. A silver-haired titan of industry rustling through the Financial Times, a fashion model scrolling through her phone with practiced indifference, a young tech heir already sipping his first glass of champagne, the bubbles rising in perfect symmetry. And then there was Marcus Reynolds in seat 2A. He was dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit, the fabric whispering of Savile Row, not shouting. His shoes, hand-stitched Oxfords, were polished to a mirror shine. His wristwatch, a subtle Patek Philippe, spoke of success without screaming it. His briefcase, made of the finest black leather, sat beside him like a loyal companion. Marcus possessed a stillness that was often mistaken for aloofness. It was in fact the deep calm of a man who had wrestled chaos to the ground and won. He'd built Onyx Capital Partners from a small office and a second-hand desk into a multi-billion-dollar powerhouse that specialized in turning undervalued companies into market leaders. As the remaining passengers boarded, Marcus closed his eyes briefly, the cabin's ambient sounds fading as memories washed over him. He was 7 years old again, sitting on the porch of their modest Chicago home, the wooden steps creaking beneath him, the scent of his mother's lemon pound cake wafting through the screen door. His father's calloused hand rested on his shoulder after a day when young Marcus had come home in tears, his new school uniform torn from an encounter with boys who didn't want him in their classroom. Son, his father had said, his voice low and steady like a river current. There will always be people who'll judge you before they know you. That's their burden to carry, not yours. Your job is to be so good they can't ignore you, and too strong to let their ignorance define you. William Reynolds had been a mathematics professor who'd faced his own battles with prejudice in academia, yet never let bitterness corrupt his spirit. He'd taught Marcus to transform frustration into focus, anger into excellence. On that porch, he'd given his son a small, polished black stone, onyx. This is what pressure creates, he'd explained. Something beautiful and strong. Remember that when the world pushes against you. Now, as CEO of one of the most successful private equity firms in America, Marcus lived by those principles. His reputation in the financial world was built on precision, discipline, and unimpeachable conduct. He wasn't just good. He was exceptional, and his results spoke louder than any prejudice could. The robotics firm deal he'd just closed was particularly satisfying. Artemis Robotics had revolutionary technology but floundering leadership. Where others saw risk, Marcus saw potential. After 6 months of negotiations, the acquisition was complete. His team in London was preparing to integrate Artemis into their European operations, potentially doubling its value within 2 years. Marcus had just settled in his leather briefcase, stowed neatly beneath the seat in front of him, when his phone buzzed with a message from Sofia Rodriguez, his second-in-command. "Congratulations on Artemis. The board is thrilled. Enjoy your quiet time before London chaos begins." Sofia had been with him almost from the beginning. Brilliant, tenacious, and fiercely loyal, she'd helped transform Onyx from a promising startup to a global force. Her own path hadn't been easy. A Puerto Rican woman from the Bronx breaking into high finance, and perhaps that shared experience of being the perpetual outsider had cemented their professional bond. He typed a quick response. "Thanks. Tell everyone I'll see them tomorrow." And Sophia, you deserve as much credit for this one. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the last of the passengers boarded. Marcus put in his noise-canceling headphones, selecting Bach's Cello Suite No. 1, and closed his eyes. The music was mathematical, precise, soothing, exactly what he needed after weeks of intense negotiations. In the calm before takeoff, Marcus fingered the small onyx stone he still carried in his pocket, a talisman connecting him to his father's wisdom. He reflected on his journey. The son of a professor and a nurse, he'd worked his way through Northwestern on scholarships, then Harvard Business School, before cutting his teeth at Goldman Sachs. 8 years later, he'd struck out on his own with a Vision Onyx Capital, named for the black volcanic stone that symbolized resilience and clarity. He chose investments that others overlooked, companies with solid foundations but mismanaged potential. His first major success was rescuing a failing manufacturing company in Detroit, turning it around within 18 months and creating hundreds of jobs in a community that desperately needed them. That established his reputation not just as a moneymaker, but as someone who built lasting value. Now, 14 years later, Onyx Capital Partners managed over $12 billion in assets. Marcus had a seat at tables that would have been unimaginable to his parents' generation. And while he knew that his presence in these elite spaces still sometimes raised eyebrows, he carried himself with an unwavering dignity that his father had instilled in him. The Bach suite flowed through his headphones, a mathematical order that reflected his own approach to life, deliberate, structured, and yet filled with a deep, resonant beauty. In this moment on this plane, Marcus Reynolds was exactly where he was supposed to be. The calm that Marcus had cultivated was shattered by a tap on his shoulder. He opened his eyes and removed one earphone to find a flight attendant standing over him. Her name tag read Patricia Wilson, and she wore the designation of senior cabin crew. Her smile stretched tight, a practiced veneer that didn't quite reach her eyes. They held a flicker of something clinical, an assessing glance that swept over Marcus, his suit, his expensive watch, and seemed to find a discrepancy. "Sir," she began, her voice a little too loud in the quiet cabin, "can I help you with something?" The subtle perfume she wore, too sweet and slightly cloying, invaded Marcus's space as she leaned in closer than necessary. The overhead lights caught the silver strands in her blonde hair, pulled back so tightly it seemed to strain against her temples. Marcus lowered his phone. "I'm quite all right, thank you. It's just," she continued, gesturing vaguely. "This is the first-class cabin. Economy boarding is further down the jet bridge." The air around them seemed to drop a few degrees. The titan of industry rustled his newspaper, his focus suddenly broken. Marcus felt a familiar, weary tightening in his chest, the onyx stone suddenly heavy in his pocket. He had encountered this 100 times in 100 different forms. The security guard in the high-end store, the skeptical doorman at the club, the waiter who presented the check to his white dinner guest. He maintained his calm, level tone. "I'm aware. My seat is 2A. Patricia's smile faltered, replaced by a mask of professional skepticism. "Of course. Could I just see your boarding pass, please?" He didn't sigh, though he wanted to. He simply reached into his jacket, pulled out the crisp cardstock, and handed it to her. She examined it as if it were a complex legal document, turning it over in her hands. Her fingernails painted a perfect French manicure tapped against the paper. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the distant sound of luggage being loaded beneath them. "Everything in order?" Marcus asked, his voice still soft, but with a new edge of steel. "Yes, it seems to be," she conceded, handing it back with reluctance that hung in the air between them. "It's just, we have to be careful. Sometimes passengers get confused." She walked away without another word, leaving the insinuation hanging in the air like cheap perfume. Marcus took a deep breath, pushing the incident aside. He was a master of compartmentalization. He wouldn't let petty small minds disrupt his equilibrium. He put in his noise-canceling headphones again, selecting Bach's Cello Suite, and closed his eyes. but the peace was short-lived. A few minutes later, another tap on his shoulder. It was Patricia again, her perfume announcing her presence, even before he opened his eyes. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to place your briefcase in the overhead bin. It cannot be on the floor during taxi and takeoff." Marcus looked down. His briefcase was tucked securely under the seat in front of him in the designated storage space exactly as per airline regulations. It wasn't protruding into the aisle. The soft leather caught the cabin light, the brass buckles gleaming. "It's not on the floor," he stated simply. "It's under the seat where it belongs." "It's a safety hazard, sir," she insisted, her voice gaining a sharp parental tone. All large bags must go overhead. His briefcase was a slim, elegant thing far from large. The man in 2B, James Whitfield, the tech heir, had a bulky backpack in the exact same spot. Patricia hadn't said a word to him. Marcus glanced at Whitfield's bag, at least twice the size of his own briefcase, then back at Patricia's face, watching the realization of her double-standard register, and be quickly dismissed. "With all due respect," Marcus said, removing his headphones completely, "my bag is stowed correctly, according to FAA and your own airline's guidelines. The gentleman next to me has a larger bag in the same position." He gestured with his head. Patricia's eyes flicked to the other passenger, then back to Marcus. A flush crept up her neck, spreading like watercolor on paper. She was being challenged, and she didn't like it. "Sir, I am the senior flight attendant on this aircraft. My instructions are a matter of safety, not a debate. Please put the bag in the overhead bin now, or I'll have to get the captain." The threat was absurd, a ridiculous escalation over nothing. It was clear now this wasn't about the briefcase. It was about authority. It was about her discomfort with his presence. The entire micro-drama was being played out for the other passengers, who were now openly staring, their expressions ranging from embarrassment to faint annoyance at the disruption. Across the aisle, Elizabeth Monroe, the fashion model, was subtly angling her phone toward the interaction, the camera lens catching the light. Marcus noted this with a mixture of resignation and foresight. Nothing remained private in the digital age. Marcus was a strategist. He calculated the odds, the potential outcomes. Causing a scene would only brand him as the angry black man. It would validate her narrative. Quiet compliance was the path of least resistance. With a slow, deliberate movement, he retrieved his briefcase, stood up, and placed it in the empty bin above his seat. The latch clicked shut with a finality that echoed in his ears. He sat back down and met her gaze. Her victory was sour. "Thank you for your cooperation," she said stiffly, before turning her attention to offering James Whitfield another glass of champagne. Her voice suddenly honeyed as she leaned closer to the younger man than necessary. Marcus closed his eyes again, but Bach couldn't soothe the cold anger solidifying in his gut. This was meant to be his moment of peace. Instead, he was being publicly disciplined like a disobedient child. He thought of calling Sophia, sharing this absurdity with someone who would understand the unique strain of these moments, but decided against it. He would not let this small-minded woman occupy any more of his mental real estate than necessary. The final straw came just before the cabin door was closed. Patricia was making her final pass when she stopped at his row again. He was on a quiet call with his London office manager, confirming his car service, the hushed voices of boarding passengers nearly drowning out the conversation. "Sir, all electronic devices need to be in airplane mode now. We are preparing for pushback." "I'm just finishing up," Marcus said quietly into the phone. "I'll see you at the terminal." "Thanks." He ended the call and switched his phone to airplane mode, the screen glowing blue momentarily. Patricia stood there, arms crossed, the overhead light casting harsh shadows across her face. "Sir, I told you to turn off your phone. That was a direct instruction." "And as you can see," Marcus said, holding up the screen showing the airplane icon, "I have complied. I don't appreciate your tone, sir. You've been problematic since you boarded." Problematic. The word hit him like a physical blow, reverberating in his chest where the onyx stone now felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket. He who built his empire on precision, on discipline, on unimpeachable conduct was being labeled problematic for sitting quietly in a seat he had paid for. "And I," Marcus replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying more weight than all her shrill commands do not appreciate being harassed. "I have followed every rule. Your issue is not with my bag or my phone. It is with me, and I will not be spoken to this way." That was it. He had drawn the line. For Patricia, it was a declaration of war. "That's it," she snapped, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm getting the captain." She disappeared into the cockpit, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. A few minutes later, she returned, followed by Captain Robert Blackwell, a man in his late 50s with a stern jaw and eyes that held the weary authority of someone who had seen it all and was impressed by none of it. His uniform was impeccably pressed, the gold stripes on his epaulets catching the light as he moved. So the captain began, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, the smell of mint mouthwash preceding his words. "My flight attendant informs me you've been causing a disturbance and refusing to follow crew instructions." "That is a complete mischaracterization," Captain Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. "Your flight attendant has singled me out and harassed me since I stepped on this plane. I have complied with every legitimate request." Captain Blackwell listened, but he wasn't hearing. His eyes never quite met Marcus's, instead focusing on a point just past his shoulder. He was processing a problem that needed to be solved quickly to ensure an on-time departure. His flight attendant was a known quantity. Marcus was a variable in the rigid hierarchy of air travel. The crew's word was law. "My crew is responsible for the safety and security of this flight," Blackwell said, his tone final. "Ms. Wilson felt you were being aggressive and non-compliant. Her judgment is what matters here. We can't have this kind of friction on a 7-hour flight. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to deplane." The words hung in the air, stunningly absolute, like a door slamming shut. "You're removing me from the flight?" Marcus asked, incredulous. "For what?" "For being on the phone for 10 seconds. For putting my bag where everyone else puts their bag. I'm removing you because my crew feels unsafe." The captain stated, his face a granite mask. "We have a zero-tolerance policy." The titan of industry now looked deeply uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact with anyone. Elizabeth Monroe was filming the entire exchange on her phone, her perfect eyebrows raised in disbelief. James Whitfield stared at his champagne, suddenly fascinated by the bubbles, his fingers nervously tapping against the crystal. Marcus felt a surge of white-hot fury building inside him like magma beneath a volcano's surface. His fingers closed around the onyx stone in his pocket, feeling its smooth edges, its cool surface a stark contrast to the heat rising within him. But he contained it. Rage was a blunt instrument. He preferred a scalpel. He stood up slowly, the impeccable tailoring of his suit a stark contrast to the ugliness of the situation. He looked at the captain, at Patricia's smug, triumphant face, and at the other passengers. He said nothing. The silence was his statement. As 2 airport security officers arrived to escort him, the heavy clunk of their utility belts and radios breaking the tense quiet, Marcus paused and looked directly at Captain Blackwell. "You are making a grave mistake," he said, his voice calm and precise. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact, a promise of a future reckoning that the captain in his comfortable authority could not possibly comprehend. As he was led down the jet bridge past the curious and pitying stares of the economy passengers, a phrase from Patricia echoed in his mind, something she had muttered to the captain when she thought he couldn't hear. "It's always people like him." Marcus Reynolds stepped back into the terminal of JFK not as a victim, but as a predator who had just been handed a new, unexpected, and deeply personal target. The robotics firm was yesterday's business. Today, Marcus Reynolds had a new acquisition in mind. The humiliation on the jet bridge was a public spectacle. But Marcus's reaction was intensely private. He didn't shout. He didn't demand to see a supervisor. He simply walked with the security guards back to the terminal, his posture erect, his expression unreadable. The anger was there, a molten core deep inside him, but on the surface, he was ice. Anger, he knew, was a fire that could forge a weapon or consume the man who wielded it. He intended to build a weapon. The terminal bustled around him, travelers rushing past with no idea of the transformation that had just occurred in the man standing perfectly still amidst their chaos. The smell of airport coffee shops and the constant announcements over the PA system created a backdrop of normalcy that felt surreal against the turmoil inside him. Marcus watched through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Flight 117 pulled away from the gate, the massive jet engines roaring to life, carrying Patricia Wilson, Captain Blackwell, and the other first-class passengers to London without him. He didn't wave, he didn't curse. He simply observed, cataloging details, filing away emotions for later use. His phone buzzed. It was Alicia Morales, his girlfriend of 2 years. The screen lit up with her photo. Alicia laughing in Central Park last autumn, leaves falling around her like confetti, her dark hair catching the sunlight. They had plans for a weekend in Paris once his London meetings concluded. Just landed in Paris early. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Miss you. He stared at the message, suddenly aware of a gulf that had opened between his planned future and his present reality. For a moment, he considered telling her what had happened, seeking the comfort of shared outrage. But that wasn't who Marcus Reynolds was. He compartmentalized. He strategized. He conquered. His thumb hovered over the phone for a long moment before typing, "Plans have changed. Need to stay in NY for urgent business. Will explain later. I'm sorry." He sent the message knowing it would disappoint her, knowing too that this was just the first of many personal costs he was about to incur. The thought should have troubled him more than it did. The fact that it didn't was troubling in itself. His phone buzzed again almost immediately. What we've been planning this for months. What could possibly be more urgent? The hurt was palpable even through text. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Alicia deserved better than this. She deserved more than a cryptic text dismissing plans they'd made together. But how could he explain that a flight attendant's prejudice had just rerouted his entire life? "I'll call you tonight." It's complicated. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, feeling the weight of the onyx stone against it. 2 talismans, one from his past, one from his present, both reminding him of connections that mattered. Connections he was now putting at risk. His first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to Sophia Rodriguez. Sophia was an MIT graduate with a mind like a steel trap and a loyalty to Marcus that was absolute. She was the yin to his yang. Where he was the visionary strategist, she was the master of execution. "Sophia," he said, his voice clipped. "Change of plans. I'm not coming to London tonight. Book me a suite at the Carlyle and get Michael Townsend on the phone. I want him in my suite in 1 hour." Michael was Onyx's chief counsel, a shark in a tailored suit. "Is everything all right, Marcus?" Sophia's voice was sharp with concern. "I'll brief you both when you get here. Let's just say I've encountered an unexpected investment opportunity." Next, he called Dr. Vanessa Patel, his former professor at Harvard Business School and now his most trusted advisor. 15 years his senior, Vanessa had become a mentor, confidant, and occasional moral compass when Marcus's ruthless business instincts threatened to overshadow his ethical foundations. "Vanessa, are you in New York?" "Marcus, I thought you were London-bound tonight." Her voice carried the lilting remains of her Mumbai upbringing, warm and familiar. "Change of plans. I need your perspective on something. Dinner at the Carlyle, 8 p.m. That sounds serious? And intriguing. I'll be there." As he walked through the terminal toward the exit, Marcus passed a newsstand. The Financial Times front page carried a story about Global Heritage Group, a British multinational conglomerate with interests in luxury hotels, shipping, and airlines, including Zenith. The photo showed Lord William Preston, the aging aristocrat who chaired the company, smiling benevolently at a charity gala, crystal chandeliers gleaming above him, surrounded by London's elite in black tie. Marcus paused, picked up the paper, and paid for it without breaking stride. An hour later, in the palatial suite overlooking Central Park, the scene was set. Marcus, now out of his suit jacket, stood before a window, a glass of untouched Macallan 25 in his hand, amber liquid catching the fading sunlight. Sophia and Michael sat on a plush sofa, listening intently as he recounted the entire incident, leaving out no detail from Patricia's first condescending question to Captain Blackwell's final dismissive judgment. He relayed the phrase he'd overheard. It's always people like him. As he spoke, he could see his own reflection in the window glass, composed, controlled, but with a darkness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Was this who he was becoming? Someone who would leverage billions in resources over a personal slight. The thought gave him pause, but only briefly. This wasn't just about him. It was about power and its abuses, about consequence and accountability. When he finished, the room was silent, save for the distant honk of taxis far below. Michael, the lawyer, spoke first. This is an open and shut case, Marcus. It's blatant textbook discrimination. We'll sue them into the ground. We'll depose the flight attendant, the captain, every passenger on that flight. We'll subpoena their records, their HR files. Zenith Airlines will be writing you a check with so many zeros it'll look like a binary code. The press will have a field day. Marcus turned from the window, his eyes dark. A check, Michael. Do you think this is about money? It's about punitive damages, Michael corrected, running a hand through his sandy hair. It's about making them pay. Making them pay a fine is a cost of doing business. Marcus countered, his voice low and intense. They'll issue a boilerplate apology, fire the flight attendant maybe, and implement some meaningless sensitivity training that everyone will sleep through. The board will approve the settlement. Their stock will dip for a week, and then it will recover. The captain will keep his job. The CEO will keep his bonus. And the structure that allowed this to happen remains intact. Nothing fundamentally changes. He set the glass down on the marble side table with a soft clink. I'm not interested in damages. I'm interested in damage. Sophia leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with understanding. She knew how Marcus's mind worked. He didn't just play the game. He changed the rules. What are you thinking? A lawsuit is asking for justice, Sophia said. I'm in a position to dispense it, Marcus replied. He picked up the Financial Times and tossed it on the coffee table between them, open to the story on Global Heritage Group. The paper landed with a soft thud, Lord Preston's smiling face looking up at them. Zenith Airlines. Who are they? Sophia already had her laptop open, her fingers flying across the keyboard, the blue glow reflecting off her glasses. Zenith Airlines, Inc., publicly traded on the NYSE ticker ZEN. Market cap around $4.2 billion. Decent balance sheet, but their margins are razor thin. Fuel costs, labor disputes. The usual airline woes. Their CEO is a man named Richard Hargrove, a classic corporate lifer. Been in the industry for 30 years. Who's their biggest shareholder? Marcus asked. Sophia's typing paused. She squinted at the screen, then looked up at Marcus, recognition dawning in her eyes. That's where it gets interesting. They're not fully independent. About 55% of their stock is owned by a parent company, a holding group called Global Heritage Group. Global Heritage Group. Marcus repeated the name, tasting it like a fine wine. Tell me about them. British-based, a massive, slightly old-fashioned conglomerate, Sophia explained, pulling up charts and financial statements on her laptop. Ticker GHG on the London Stock Exchange. They own Zenith, a luxury hotel chain, a shipping company, and a few other assets. They're much bigger. Market cap is north of $25 billion, run by an old money aristocrat. She continued scrolling through an article, the light from the screen highlighting the determination in her face. Chairman Lord William Preston. He inherited the position from his father. Their portfolio is bloated. Some winners, but a lot of dead weight. They're over-leveraged from their last acquisition, one of their competitors in the hotel space. A slow, predatory smile touched Marcus's lips for the first time that night. It was more perfect than he could have imagined. This wasn't just about a middling American airline anymore. This was about old-world established power. The kind of power that trickled down, creating corporate cultures that allowed a Patricia Wilson to feel so emboldened. Lord William Preston, Marcus mused, picking up his untouched whiskey at last. I'm sure he's never been told his bag was a safety hazard. Michael the lawyer looked from Marcus to Sophia, his legal mind struggling to keep up with the corporate rating one. He loosened his tie, a nervous habit when he felt out of his depth. What are you suggesting? You can't just buy a $25 billion company because you were kicked off a flight. Of course not, Marcus said calmly, taking a sip of the Macallan. That would be emotional. And I am not emotional. I am strategic. He turned to Sophia. I want a full workup on Global Heritage Group. I want to know every asset, every liability, every debt covenant, every major shareholder. I want to know where Lord Preston has lunch, who his enemies are on the board, and what keeps him up at night. This isn't about Zenith anymore. Zenith is just a symptom. Global Heritage is the disease, and we are going to be the cure. This is a hostile takeover, Sophia said, the sheer audacity of it dawning on her. It'll be a bloody public war. No, Marcus corrected her, the whiskey burning pleasantly as he swallowed. A hostile takeover is a frontal assault. It's loud, it's messy, and it gives them time to build their defenses. We're not going to be soldiers. We're going to be ghosts. The plan began to form in his mind, sharp and clear. This would be a masterpiece of corporate warfare waged in the shadows. Phase 1, he announced, pacing the suite, now the energy crackling around him. Silent accumulation. We'll use a network of shell corporations registered in obscure jurisdictions. Cayman, Liechtenstein, Panama. We'll start buying up GHG stock on the open market, small blocks at a time, staying under the 5% disclosure threshold for as long as possible. No one will see a single large buyer. They'll just see market noise. Phase 2, destabilization. Sophia, your analysis is right. They're bloated and over-leveraged. We need to find their weakest point and press on it. Does their shipping company have exposure to new environmental regulations? Is their hotel chain vulnerable to a market downturn? We'll find that vulnerability and use our allies in the financial media to shine a very bright, very unflattering light on it. We'll feed anonymous tips to reporters at the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. We'll sow doubt. Phase 3. The Alliance. He continued, his voice gaining momentum. Every board has factions. Lord Preston, the inherited chairman, must have rivals, people who think he's a dinosaur. We find them. We find the disgruntled shareholders, the pension funds who are unhappy with their returns. We'll approach them discreetly, show them our plan for unlocking value, for streamlining the company, for making it profitable again. We'll get them on our side before the battle even starts. And Phase 4, Michael asked now, completely captivated, legal concerns forgotten in the face of such breathtaking ambition. Marcus stopped in front of him, his eyes blazing with cold fire. Phase 4 is the reveal. The day we cross the disclosure threshold and file our 13D with the SEC and the London equivalent. The day Lord William Preston wakes up, reads the morning's financial news, and discovers that an entity he has never heard of, controlled by a man he has never met, now owns a significant controlling stake in his family's empire. And that man is the same problematic passenger his little airline kicked off a flight. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the luxurious room, the city lights now twinkling beyond the windows as dusk deepened into night. "They wanted to put me in my place," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet. "They're about to learn that my place is in the chairman's seat." But even as he spoke with such certainty, a small voice inside him wondered, was this justice he was seeking or something darker? Was he becoming what he despised? Someone who wielded power without restraint? He pushed the thought away, but it lingered in the shadows of his mind, a question without an answer. The meeting in the Carlisle suite ended near dawn. Michael Townsend was tasked with setting up the labyrinthine legal structure of shell companies. Sophia Rodriguez began the deep dive into GHG's financials, her team of analysts at Onyx Capital about to be assigned the project of their lives. Marcus himself finally went to bed, but not to sleep. He lay awake in the king-sized bed, the Egyptian cotton sheets cool against his skin, staring at the ceiling where shadows played across the ornate moldings. His mind replayed the scene on the plane, not with anger anymore, but with a chilling sense of clarity. Every condescending word from Patricia, every dismissive gesture from the captain was now just data. It was the fuel for the engine he was building. He thought about the name of his firm, Onyx Capital. Onyx is a stone born from the immense heat and pressure of a volcano. It is black sharp, and when polished, it can reflect the truth. Marcus Reynolds had been put under immense pressure. Now he was ready to show Global Heritage Group its own reflection. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Alicia. "What's going on? I've been waiting for more details. Are you okay?" The concern in her text brought a pang of guilt. Alicia had been his anchor for 2 years, the person who saw beyond Marcus Reynolds' CEO to simply Marcus, the man who laughed at old Hitchcock movies, who still got nervous before major presentations, who could spend hours in the kitchen perfecting his grandmother's gumbo recipe. She deserved better than cryptic texts and canceled plans. Marcus stared at the screen, the blue light harsh in the darkened room. How could he explain this? Alicia was brilliant, a successful architect with her own firm, but she had always viewed his occasional encounters with discrimination as unfortunate incidents to be processed and moved past, not engines of transformation. She wouldn't understand why this time was different, why this time he couldn't just let it go. He dialed her number. It was late in New York, which meant early morning in Paris. She answered on the second ring. "Marcus." "What's happening?" "Are you all right?" Her voice was thick with sleep, but alert with concern. "I'm fine," he said, realizing as the words left his mouth that it wasn't entirely true. "Something happened. I was removed from my flight." "What? Why?" He told her the story, trying to keep his tone neutral, but the anger seeped through as he described Patricia Wilson's behavior, Captain Blackwell's dismissal, the humiliation of being escorted off the plane. "Oh my God, Marcus, that's horrible," Alicia said when he finished. "Have you filed a complaint? We should get a lawyer on this immediately." "It's more complicated than that," he said carefully. "I'm looking into other options." "What does that mean?" Her voice sharpened. She knew him too well. "It means I'm handling it, but I won't be coming to Paris. I need to stay in New York for this." A pause filled with the static of international connection and unspoken thoughts. "Marcus," she said finally, "don't let them change you. Don't let them make you into something you're not." The words hit him harder than he expected. Was that what was happening? Was he letting Patricia Wilson and Captain Blackwell and their casual cruelty transform him? "I'm still me," he said. But even to his own ears, the words sounded hollow. "Are you?" Because the Marcus I know would file a formal complaint, maybe pursue legal action, then move forward with his life. He wouldn't cancel long-standing plans with his girlfriend over a flight attendant's prejudice. He wouldn't be so cryptic and withdrawn. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the distance between them expanding. Not just the physical miles, but something deeper. "This matters, Alicia. It matters in a way I can't fully explain right now. More than us. The question hung in the air between them. Marcus had no good answer. I'll make it up to you, I promise. When this is done. When what is done? Marcus? What exactly are you planning? I'll explain everything. Just not now. Not over the phone. Please trust me. Another silence, this one heavier than the last. I do trust you, she said finally. That's why I'm worried. You've never been vengeful. It's one of the things I've always admired about you. Don't start now. After they hung up, Marcus lay back on the bed, her words echoing in his mind. Vengeful. Was that what this was? Revenge? Or was it justice? The line between them seemed suddenly blurred like a photograph out of focus. His phone buzzed one more time. I love you. Be careful. Not just with whatever you're planning, but with yourself. The next morning, Marcus established what would become known within Onyx Capital as Project Eclipse. In a secure, isolated section of their Manhattan office, he assembled a team of his most trusted analysts, lawyers, and strategists. The space was transformed overnight. New secure servers, installed walls covered in whiteboards and glass panels, comfortable furniture for the long hours ahead. The name was Sophia's idea. The sun was setting on the old guard of Global Heritage Group. The small onyx stone that Marcus had carried since childhood now sat on his desk in the Project Eclipse headquarters, a silent reminder of his purpose. He stood before a gleaming glass wall that would soon be covered with charts, financial data, and the intricate web of their plan. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floor. What we're about to undertake, he told the assembled team, is more than a business acquisition. It's a reckoning. The target Global Heritage Group represents an old world of inherited privilege and entitlement. They've grown comfortable, complacent. They believe their position is unassailable because it always has been. We're going to show them how wrong they are. He outlined the four-phase plan, watching understanding and excitement dawn on their faces. This was why they had joined Onyx. Not just for the paycheck, but for the thrill of the impossible challenge, the perfectly executed strategy. As the team dispersed to their assignments, Sophia stayed behind. She leaned against his desk, arms crossed, studying him with the frank assessment that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. You should know, she said, Richard Hargrove, the CEO of Zenith, received your complaint letter this morning. Marcus had almost forgotten. After the incident, his personal assistant had filed a detailed complaint, not through Onyx's counsel, but as a private citizen, outlining the discriminatory treatment he'd experienced. And Sophia handed him a printout. It was a response from Zenith Airline's Customer Relations Department, signed by Hargrove himself. It offered sincere apologies for any misunderstanding and enclosed a $500 travel voucher as a gesture of goodwill. Marcus stared at the letter, then at the voucher. $500. That was the value they placed on his dignity. That was their assessment of the cost of discrimination, less than the price of a single first-class cocktail. Without a word, he pinned the letter and voucher to the otherwise empty glass wall. It would be the first piece in the mosaic of their mission, a daily reminder of why they were doing this. Let the games begin, he said. But as Sophia turned to leave, she paused at the door. Marcus. Yes. Is this about justice? Or is it personal? The question caught him off guard. It was the same one he'd been asking himself in the dark hours of the night. Does it matter? He countered. I think it does, Sophia said quietly. Justice builds something new, the personal. Sometimes it just tears things down. She left before he could respond, the door closing softly behind her. Marcus stood alone in the room, looking at the voucher pinned to the wall, feeling suddenly unsure of his own motivations. Was this the noble crusade he'd described to his team? Or was it simply the sophisticated vengeance of a man with resources? The question followed him throughout the day, a shadow that wouldn't dissipate no matter how bright the lights. The accumulation of stock was a masterpiece of stealth. Michael Townsend's legal team had created a web of over 20 shell companies with innocuous names like Atlantic Holdings, Eurovest Partners, and Seaside Limited. Each one purchased small, irregular blocks of GHG stock, never enough to trigger alarms. The trades were executed through different brokers in London, Frankfurt, and Zurich. To any market analyst, it looked like a slight uptick in institutional interest, nothing more. By the end of the first month, they had silently acquired 4.9% of Global Heritage Group, hovering just below the mandatory disclosure threshold. They were a loaded gun with the safety on. Marcus, meanwhile, had established a ritual. Each morning, before sunrise, he would sit alone in his apartment, before a chessboard playing against himself. The polished wooden pieces gleamed in the soft lamplight, the room silent save for the gentle click of each move. It wasn't merely a game. It was a meditation on strategy, on patience, on seeing multiple moves ahead. It was also a connection to his father who had taught him the game as a child. The onyx stone sat at the edge of the board, a silent observer to his deliberations. White moves, black counters, attack, defend, sacrifice, gain. The rhythm of the game calmed his mind, focused his thoughts. The chess pieces, kings, queens, knights, pawns, were so much like the players in the corporate game he was orchestrating. Lord Preston the King, Richard Hargrove and Captain Blackwell knights defending their master. Patricia Wilson, a pawn who had inadvertently set everything in motion. And what was he in this game? The player himself, moving pieces across the board with careful precision. But there was a danger in that role, the temptation to see people as mere pieces, to forget the humanity in the pursuit of victory. This morning, as dawn broke over Manhattan, casting the chessboard in soft golden light, his phone rang. It was Alicia. "I'm starting to forget what you look like," she said, her attempt at lightness not quite masking the hurt underneath. "I know. I'm sorry." He moved a black knight, capturing a white pawn with a soft click. "This project is all-consuming right now. More all-consuming than Artemis, than the Singapore expansion, than the tech venture fund." There was an edge to her voice now. "There's always a project, Marcus. There's always something that can't wait. But relationships can't wait forever either." He was silent, staring at the chessboard, the captured white pawn lying on its side beside the board. She was right, of course. The pattern had been established long before the Zenith incident, his tendency to retreat into work when faced with emotional complexity. But this was different. This was necessary. "I need you to understand," he said finally. "This isn't just another deal. Then help me understand. Tell me what's really going on. All I know is you were kicked off a flight, and now you're barely speaking to me. What aren't you telling me?" The morning light caught the onyx stone, making it gleam like a dark star. Marcus picked it up, feeling its familiar weight in his palm. "I'm planning to acquire Global Heritage Group," he said finally. A stunned silence followed. The $25 billion conglomerate. "Because of what happened on the plane." Her voice was incredulous. "Marcus, that's disproportionate. It's obsessive. It's necessary." He insisted. "This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about a system that allows it to happen to anyone. It's about consequences for people who never face any. And what about the consequences for us, for you? Is this really who you want to be? Someone who uses billions in resources to pursue a personal vendetta?" The question struck closer to home than he wanted to admit. It echoed his own doubts, the ones he pushed away during the day, but that resurfaced in the quiet hours of the night. "It's not a vendetta," he said, but the words sounded defensive even to his own ears. "It's a business opportunity. GHG is poorly managed, over-leveraged. It's ripe for restructuring. Don't insult me by pretending this is just business." Alicia replied, her voice tight with emotion. "I know you better than that." He was silent, turning the onyx stone over and over in his hand. "Paris would have been nice," she finally said, a world of disappointment in the simple statement. "Call me when you're ready to be present again." The line went dead. Marcus set down the phone and returned to his game. He captured the white queen with a black bishop. Check. But not checkmate. Not yet. The game continued as it always did. But now there was a heaviness to it, a sense of something valuable being sacrificed. Later that morning, in the Project Eclipse headquarters, Sophia was presenting her findings on GHG's financial structure. The room smelled of fresh coffee and the subtle cologne of the analysts who had been working through the night. The hum of computers provided a backdrop to Sophia's precise, articulate briefing. Their weakness, she announced to Marcus and the assembled team, pointing to a complex flowchart on a massive screen, isn't the hotel chain or the shipping line, it's their pension fund. She zoomed in on a section of the chart, the images reflected in her glasses as she gestured with a laser pointer, the red dot dancing across numbers and projections. "It's a classic case of old-world mismanagement." Lord Preston, in an attempt to juice his quarterly reports, has been underfunding the company's pension obligations for years, using optimistic, outdated actuarial tables to justify it. The fund is heavily invested in GHG's own stock, a house of cards waiting for a gust of wind. She clicked to the next slide, showing a comparison of industry standards versus GHG's practices. The contrast stark in red and green bars. "He's been robbing his own employees' retirement to make his earnings per share look good," she explained, her voice tinged with genuine disgust. "It's technically legal, but it's colossally irresponsible. If the stock takes a significant hit, the fund becomes insolvent. The British pension regulators would have a field day. The scandal would be enormous." Marcus studied the data, a grim satisfaction settling over him. This wasn't just a strategic weakness. It was a moral failing, a perfect encapsulation of the kind of leader Lord Preston was. "That's our lever," Marcus said. "Time to start pushing." He made a call to a trusted contact, a veteran financial journalist at the Financial Times named Jonathan Pierce, a man with a nose for corporate malfeasance and a healthy distrust of the British aristocracy. Marcus didn't give him the whole story, just a crumb. An anonymous tip. "Jonathan," he said, using a secure encrypted line, the white noise generator beside him creating a cocoon of privacy. "You might want to take a look at the actuarial assumptions in Global Heritage Group's pension fund. I hear they're still partying like it's 1999. That was all it took. 2 weeks later, the Financial Times published a devastating front-page exposé headlined, "The Gilt-Edged Gamble is Global Heritage risking its pensioners' future." The article laid out in excruciating detail how Lord Preston's management had left the company's own retirees vulnerable. The market reacted instantly. GHG's stock, which had been stagnant for years, dipped 5%, then 8%. Panicked investors started selling. In his stately office in Mayfair, London, Lord William Preston was apoplectic. He was a man insulated by generations of wealth and privilege, unaccustomed to public scrutiny. He saw the article not as a financial analysis, but as a personal attack. "Who did this?" he bellowed at his board of directors in an emergency meeting. "This is a smear campaign. Find the source." His board, a collection of aging sycophants and a few quietly resentful executives, offered platitudes and promises of an internal review. But the damage was done. Doubt had been introduced into the system. This was the moment Marcus had been waiting for. With the stock price depressed, Onyx Capital's shell companies went on a buying spree. The price was lower, and the increased trading volume provided perfect cover for their larger purchases. Within a month, their stake grew from 4.9% to over 15%. They were now the single largest shareholder of Global Heritage Group, and nobody knew it. Back in New York, Marcus received another kind of communication, the formal response to his discrimination complaint against Zenith Airlines. He had escalated his complaint to their corporate offices after the insulting voucher offer demanding a formal investigation. The letter from Richard Hargrove's office was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak. After careful review of the incident on Flight 117, we have found that all crew members acted in accordance with our safety protocols and professional standards. While we regret any misunderstanding that may have occurred, we stand by our crew's judgment in matters of cabin safety and passenger compliance. We consider this matter closed. Marcus pinned this letter next to the voucher on the glass wall of Project Eclipse. Another piece of the mosaic, another fuel for the fire. That evening, Marcus found himself once again playing chess alone in his apartment. But this time he had company. Dr. Vanessa Patel sat across from him, not playing, just observing. The rich aroma of the Indian tea she preferred filled the room, mingling with the scent of old books from his shelves. They had been talking for hours, strategizing, analyzing, but also reflecting. "You know what concerns me most," Vanessa said, watching as Marcus captured a rook, her silver-streaked hair catching the lamplight. "You're not sleeping. You're barely eating. You're canceling plans with Alicia. This mission is consuming you." "It requires total focus," Marcus replied without looking up the captured rook, smooth and cool in his palm. "There's focus and then there's obsession. I'm worried you're crossing that line." He finally looked up at her. "And if I am, doesn't the end justify the means? That depends on what the end really is." She leaned forward, the scent of jasmine from her perfume momentarily stronger. "Is it truly about changing a corrupt corporate structure? Or is it about making Patricia Wilson and Captain Blackwell and Lord Preston pay for how they made you feel in that moment?" The question hung in the air between them, as tangible as the chess pieces on the board. Marcus had been asking himself the same thing in the dark hours of the night when sleep wouldn't come. "Can't it be both?" he finally asked, setting the rook down with a soft click. Vanessa smiled sadly. "It can, but one is a noble crusade, the other is a vendetta, and vendettas have a way of destroying their architects." She picked up the onyx stone from the edge of the board, examining it in the light. "Your father gave you this, didn't he?" "Yes. When I was 7. What did he tell you when he gave it to you?" Marcus was silent for a moment, remembering. "He said that pressure creates beautiful things if you can withstand it without breaking. Wise man." Vanessa set the stone back down. "But pressure can also create monsters if it twists you instead of transforming you." Marcus moved his queen across the board, positioning it for a fatal strike. "You taught me something at Harvard," he said. "You said that business at its best is about creating value, and value isn't just financial, it's social, it's moral, it's about making the world better than you found it. I remember. That's what I'm doing, Vanessa. Global Heritage Group represents an old order that needs to be dismantled, not just because of what happened to me, but because of what happens every day to people who don't have the resources I do to fight back. This is about creating a new kind of value. Then why does it feel like you're losing something valuable in the process?" she asked quietly, her gaze steady on his face. The question hit him with unexpected force. What was he losing? Sleep, certainly. Peace of mind, perhaps. But also something less tangible. A certain lightness of being the ability to laugh with Alicia over brunch, to enjoy music without an agenda, to exist without this burning purpose consuming his thoughts. Was it worth it? The question haunted him unanswered. He returned to the chessboard and made his final move. "Checkmate," he said. But the victory felt hollow somehow, the Black King standing alone amid fallen white pieces, a conqueror in an empty landscape. The next phase was finding an inside ally. Sophia's research identified the perfect candidate, Victoria Banks. She was the newest member of GHG's board, a sharp, unsentimental American businesswoman who had been appointed after GHG acquired a company she was running. She had a reputation for being pragmatic and had privately expressed frustration with Preston's resistance to modernization. She was an outsider in an old boys' club. What made Victoria particularly intriguing was her own history. As a black woman who had climbed to the upper echelons of European business, she had faced her own battles with prejudice and exclusion. According to Sophia's intelligence, Victoria had repeatedly pushed for diversity initiatives at GHG, only to be politely stonewalled by Preston and his old guard allies. Marcus decided on a direct, bold approach. He flew to Geneva, where Victoria was speaking at a women's leadership conference. The flight was his first since the Zenith incident, and he found himself tense as he boarded, half expecting another confrontation. But this was a different airline with a different culture. The flight attendant who welcomed him to first class was professional and warm, with no hint of the condescension he'd experienced with Patricia Wilson. Still, the memory of that humiliation lingered, a shadow that followed him even into this new, more welcoming space. As he settled into his seat, he found himself cataloging emergency exits, noting crew names, preparing mentally for potential conflict. It was exhausting, this hypervigilance, this inability to simply exist without anticipating prejudice. That, too, was part of the cost that Patricia Wilson and Captain Blackwell would never understand. In Geneva, the conference was held at a luxury hotel overlooking the lake, the Alps rising majestically in the distance. The air was crisp with early autumn, the scent of falling leaves mingling with the expensive perfumes of the attendees. Marcus didn't register for the conference or attend the sessions. He didn't send an emissary. He went himself. He approached Victoria after her speech in the controlled chaos of the post-conference reception, the clink of glasses and murmur of conversations creating a bubble of privacy within the crowded room. Victoria Banks was tall and striking with short silver hair that complemented her warm brown skin and piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. Her suit was impeccably tailored, her presence commanding. She was surrounded by admirers and fellow speakers, but Marcus waited patiently until there was an opening. "Ms. Banks," he said, his voice calm and direct. "My name is Marcus Reynolds. I'm the founder of Onyx Capital Partners." Victoria Banks recognized the name immediately. Onyx was a major player. She raised an eyebrow, intrigued, excusing herself from her previous conversation with a graceful nod. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm surprised to see you here. I wasn't aware you had an interest in gender parity in the boardroom. I have an interest in good governance and competent leadership wherever I can find it," Marcus replied smoothly. "Something I believe is sorely lacking at Global Heritage Group." Her professional mask was perfect, but he saw a flicker of agreement in her eyes, a momentary lowering of the guard. "All successful executives learn to maintain. Lord Preston is a traditionalist," she said, choosing her words carefully, her American accent crisp against the backdrop of European voices around them. "He's a relic," Marcus stated, dispensing with the pleasantries. "He's running a 21st century global corporation like a 19th century feudal estate. The pension fund scandal is just the tip of the iceberg. The company is rotting from the head." He paused, letting his next words land with maximum impact. "My firm has acquired a 15% stake in GHG. We are preparing a proxy fight to replace the board and install new leadership. Leadership that will modernize the company, unlock its true value, and protect its employees and shareholders. I believe you are a part of that future. Lord Preston is not." Victoria was stunned into silence. She stared at him, the champagne flute in her hand momentarily forgotten. Her mind was processing the sheer audacity of his move. A 15% stake acquired in secret. This wasn't just a corporate raider. This was a grandmaster playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. "Why are you telling me this?" she finally asked, keeping her voice low despite the noise of the reception. "Because you see what I see," Marcus said. A bloated, mismanaged company ripe for a turnaround. And because when we make our move, I want you on our side. You know the company's weaknesses from the inside. With your support, this can be a swift surgical transition instead of a long, bloody war. He handed her a simple black business card, the Onyx logo embossed in subtle contrast against the matte surface. Think about it. We're filing our disclosure in 4 weeks. The world will know then. You have a chance to be on the right side of history. He walked away, leaving her to stare at the card. He had planted the seed. Now he just had to wait for it to grow. Meanwhile, back in the U.S., one of the original antagonists, Richard Hargrove, the CEO of Zenith Airlines, had handled the Marcus Reynolds incident with textbook corporate indifference. He received the detailed complaint letter from Marcus's personal lawyer, not Onyx's counsel, outlining the event. Hargrove passed it to his PR department, who drafted a standard response. They offered Mr. Reynolds a $500 travel voucher and a written apology for the misunderstanding. Hargrove signed it without a second thought, seeing it as a minor customer service issue now resolved. He was far more concerned about his parent company's stock price, which was inexplicably tanking. In his corner office, with views of the Manhattan skyline, Hargrove's desk was cluttered with reports about the pension fund scandal, analysts' notes, and increasingly concerned emails from Lord Preston. The pressure was mounting, and he had no time for passenger complaints, no matter how well-written or serious they might be. To him, Marcus Reynolds was just another disgruntled customer, not a looming threat. Captain Robert Blackwell was still flying the lucrative New York-London route. He had filed his report, backing his flight attendant's version of events completely. He'd barely given the incident another thought. He was a company man, and he had followed procedure. As he guided the massive Airbus across the Atlantic, he felt only the usual professional satisfaction, unaware that his career was flying toward a storm of his own making. And Patricia Wilson, the flight attendant, felt vindicated. She had, in her mind, protected her aircraft from a problematic man. She boasted to her colleagues about how she had stood her ground. You should have seen his face when the captain showed up. She told them in the crew lounge, the fluorescent lights harsh against the institutional beige walls. These people think they can do whatever they want. Not on my flight. She had no idea that her small act of prejudice had set in motion a financial avalanche that was at that very moment threatening to bury the man who signed her paychecks, Lord William Preston, and everyone below him. She was a single match, unaware she had been dropped in a forest, drenched in gasoline. Back in New York, Marcus was taking a rare evening off from Project Eclipse. He sat in a small, exclusive restaurant in the West Village across from Alicia Morales. The intimate space was filled with the warm glow of candles, the soft murmur of conversation, and the delicate clink of silverware against fine china. It was the first time they'd seen each other in nearly 2 months. The distance between them was palpable, not just the result of busy schedules, but of secrets kept. Alicia was beautiful in a deep blue dress that complemented her olive skin, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders, her eyes bright with intelligence and a guarded hope. But there was a wariness in her posture that hadn't been there before, a slight tension in the way she held her wine glass. "You look tired," she said after they'd ordered, studying his face in the candlelight. "It's been intense. This mysterious project you can't tell me about." He nodded, taking a sip of his wine, the rich Bordeaux tasting suddenly bitter on his tongue. "I want to understand, Marcus. We used to share everything. Now it feels like you're living a life I'm not part of." The truth hovered on his lips. He wanted to tell her about the humiliation on that plane, about Patricia Wilson's condescension, about the fire that had been burning in him ever since. But something held him back. Perhaps it was pride, or perhaps it was the fear that she wouldn't understand the depth of his response. "It's complicated," he said finally, watching the candle flame flicker between them. "Life is complicated. Relationships are complicated. That's never stopped us before." She reached across the table and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. a touch that once would have centered him immediately but now felt like it belonged to another life, another Marcus. "Whatever this is," she said, "whatever happened, I'm on your side. Always. But I can't support what I don't understand." In that moment, looking into her eyes, Marcus made a decision. He told her everything. The incident on the plane, the dismissive response from Zenith, the discovery of Global Heritage Group, the plan to take them over. He watched her expression shift from shock to outrage to concern, the candlelight casting shadows that emphasized each change. "They had no right to treat you that way," she said when he finished, her voice tight with anger. "No, they didn't. But Marcus, buying an entire company, destroying people's careers, isn't that excessive?" There it was, the response he'd feared, the reasonable, proportional reaction of someone who had never felt the particular humiliation he had experienced, who had never been made to feel less than because of something as immutable as their skin color. It's not about the scale, he tried to explain, the words feeling inadequate. It's about the message. It's about consequences. Real consequences that can't be dismissed with a form letter and a travel voucher. "I understand that." "I do." She squeezed his hand, her eyes never leaving his face. "But I'm worried about what this is doing to you. You've always been driven, but this is different. This is personal in a way I've never seen before. Some things should be personal." She studied him for a long moment, the restaurant around them fading into a blur of distant sounds and lights. This was their own private world, a moment of truth between two people who had built a life together. "Tell me something," she said finally. "Are you doing this for justice or for revenge?" The question struck him harder than he expected. It was the same one Vanessa had asked, the same one Sophia had implied, the same one he asked himself in the quiet hours of the night. "I don't know anymore." He admitted the honesty, surprising him. "I started this believing it was about justice, about changing a broken system. But sometimes I just want them to suffer like I did, to feel powerless, humiliated, less than. And that scares me." Alicia's eyes softened. "That's the most honest thing you've said all night. Does it change how you feel about them?" "No." "About you?" "No." "About this crusade you're on?" "Maybe." She ran her thumb across his knuckles, a familiar, soothing gesture. "Just promise me something." "What?" "When this is over, when you've won, and I know you will, come back to me. Come back to us. Don't let Patricia Wilson and Captain Blackwell and Lord Preston take not just that flight from you, but everything else that matters." The request struck him harder than he expected. Had he really drifted so far? Had the pursuit of this reckoning changed him so fundamentally? "I promise," he said. But even as the words left his lips, he wondered if it was a promise he could keep. The Marcus Reynolds who had boarded that Zenith flight months ago seemed like a different person now. More trusting, more balanced, less consumed by a single purpose. Could he find his way back to that man? Or was he becoming something new, something harder, something that might win the battle, but lose everything else that mattered? The question lingered unanswered as they finished their dinner in a silence both comfortable and charged with all they had shared and all that remained unsaid. The 4 weeks passed. In London, Victoria Banks, after days of agonizing, made her decision. She saw the future Marcus Reynolds was offering, a revitalized, modern company, and compared it to the stagnant, crony-filled present under Lord Preston. The decision wasn't easy for her. As she sat in her London flat overlooking the Thames, rain pattering against the windows in a soothing rhythm, she weighed her options. A cup of Earl Grey tea cooled beside her as she reviewed her own notes from board meetings. The subtle dismissals she'd faced. The ideas ignored, the suggestions politely tabled indefinitely. She thought of the pension fund scandal of the employees whose futures were at risk because of Preston's mismanagement. But she also thought of loyalty of the promises she'd made when joining the board. Victoria Banks was not someone who broke her word easily. Yet there came a point when loyalty to an institution meant challenging its current leadership for the greater good. In the end, it wasn't just Marcus's offer that convinced her. It was the memory of a conversation with Lord Preston 6 months earlier when she had proposed a diversity initiative for senior management. "My dear," he had said, patting her hand with grandfatherly condescension, "you're here, aren't you? Isn't that diversity enough?" The boardroom had tittered with polite laughter, and her proposal had died on the table. Victoria reached her decision. She discreetly contacted Marcus and pledged her support, her voice steady over the secure line the die irrevocably cast. The stage was set. The ghost was about to appear. On a Tuesday morning at precisely 8:30 a.m. London time, Michael Townsend filed the Schedule 13D with trembling hands, the legal significance of the moment not lost on him. Simultaneously, press releases were sent to every major financial news outlet in the world. The headline was "Cataclysmic, Onyx Capital LED by U.S. billionaire Marcus Reynolds reveals 28%. Stake in Global Heritage Group launches proxy battle to oust Chairman Lord Preston." The financial world exploded. GHG stock surged on the news of a potential takeover, trading volumes reaching record levels within hours. CNBC, Bloomberg, and the BBC all interrupted regular coverage for breaking news segments. In his Mayfair office with its heavy oak paneling and views of Green Park, Lord William Preston stared at the headline on his computer screen, his face turning a shade of pale white that contrasted sharply with his usual florid complexion. The cup of English breakfast tea his secretary had brought him grew cold on his desk. Onyx Capital Marcus Reynolds. The names meant nothing to him. He was a British lord. He didn't track the dealings of American new money. But in the New York headquarters of Zenith Airlines CEO Richard Hargrove saw the name and felt a sudden cold dread creep up his spine like ice water being poured slowly down his back. Marcus Reynolds. He scrambled for his files papers, flying as he searched frantically, finally pulling up the complaint from months ago on his computer. The man his airline had kicked off a flight for being problematic. He stared at the signed apology letter and the pathetic $500 voucher offer, his mouth suddenly dry, heart pounding in his ears. He felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't a customer service issue. It was a declaration of war, and he had tried to solve it with a travel coupon. The news of Onyx Capital's stake hit Global Heritage Group like a lightning strike, the shock traveling through fiber optic cables and phone lines from boardroom to trading floor. The world that Lord William Preston had so carefully curated, one of polite board meetings, club lunches, and inherited deference, was shattered overnight. The company was now the battleground for one of the most aggressive proxy fights the London Stock Exchange had seen in a decade. Preston and his loyalists immediately went on the defensive. They hired a team of high-priced lawyers and PR consultants from the firm Brunswick. They began painting Marcus Reynolds in the press as a ruthless American corporate raider, an asset stripper who would carve up their beloved British institution and sell it for parts. They played the nationalist card, warning that a cherished piece of the UK's corporate heritage was under attack from a foreign predator. Lord Preston agreed to a television interview on the BBC, a move his advisors warned against. He saw it as an opportunity to project strength and tradition. It was a disaster. Seated in a gilded armchair in his London home, surrounded by ancestral portraits and antiques looking every bit the out-of-touch aristocrat, Preston was asked about Marcus Reynolds's critique of his leadership. "This Mr. Reynolds," he began, his upper-class accent particularly pronounced under stress. "He comes from a different world," Preston said with a condescending sniff. "A world of short-term gains and brutish tactics. We at Global Heritage believe in stewardship and legacy. This isn't just about numbers on a page. It's about a certain quality, a standard he simply wouldn't understand." The interviewer pressed him, her professional demeanor not quite hiding her skepticism. "Mr. Reynolds's firm Onyx Capital has one of the best track records for turning around companies and increasing shareholder value over the long term. Your own company's stock has been flat for 7 years. Isn't that the real issue? The camera caught Preston's momentary flash of irritation, a tightening around the eyes, a slight reddening of his already florid face. Shareholder value is one metric, Preston retorted, growing flustered, his signet ring catching the light as he gestured dismissively. But there is also heritage. There is a proper way of doing things. This man, his kind of money is loud. The interview was a gift to Marcus's camp. Loud money. Wouldn't understand. The coded language was clear to anyone paying attention. It wasn't just a defense of his company. It was a defense of his class, his world, against an outsider. The racial undertones were subtle but unmistakable. Marcus, by contrast, remained almost entirely silent. He refused all interview requests, turning down offers from CNBC, Bloomberg, and the Financial Times. His only communication was a meticulously crafted letter sent to every GHG shareholder. It was a masterpiece of corporate strategy written in cool, dispassionate language. It laid out with surgical precision the financial case for change. The letter, titled A Pathway to Renewed Value, detailed years of underperformance under Lord Preston. It highlighted the pension fund scandal, the bloated management structure, and the portfolio of underperforming assets. It then presented Marcus's plan to streamline operations, sell off non-core assets, like the struggling shipping line, reinvest heavily in the profitable core businesses like the hotel chain and Zenith Airlines, and install a new board of directors composed of industry experts, not Preston's old-school chums. The letter named Victoria Banks as his proposed new lead independent director. The effect was profound. Pension funds, institutional investors, and hedge funds, the entities that actually owned most of GHG, were not swayed by Preston's appeals to heritage. They were swayed by Marcus's promise of a higher stock price and better returns. The battle was no longer about class or nationality. It was about competence versus incompetence. In the Project Eclipse headquarters, the team was monitoring every development, every media mention, every stock price fluctuation. The wall that had once held only a $500 voucher and dismissive letters was now covered with press clippings, financial data, and a detailed timeline of their campaign. It had become a war room, and they were winning. But the victory was taking its toll. Marcus was working 18-hour days, the dark circles under his eyes deepening his normally immaculate appearance, showing subtle signs of strain. A loosened tie, the occasional wrinkled shirt, 5 o'clock shadow appearing by noon. He was sleeping on a couch in his office more often than in his own bed, the comfortable leather bearing the imprint of his restless nights. He had missed Alicia's birthday, sending flowers and an expensive watch instead of being there himself. They spoke rarely now, their conversations strained and brief. One evening, as Marcus was reviewing the latest polling of GHG's institutional shareholders, the glass wall in front of him reflecting his tired image back at him, his phone rang. It was Alicia. "I saw the BBC interview with Lord Preston," she said without preamble, the sounds of Paris, traffic, street musicians, cafe chatter, audible in the background. "The way he spoke about you, that condescending tone, those barely veiled prejudices. I get it now. I understand why this matters so much to you." Marcus was silent, surprised by the sudden shift, gripping the phone tighter as if it were a lifeline to a world he was in danger of losing. "I still worry about what this crusade is doing to you," she continued, her voice softening. "But I also see why it's necessary. Just don't lose yourself in the process." "Okay, I won't." He promised the words, feeling hollow as he stared at his reflection, a man he hardly recognized anymore, consumed by a single purpose, driven by a fire that threatened to burn everything else away. "I miss you," she said simply, the street sounds fading, as if she had stepped inside somewhere quiet, somewhere just for this confession. "I miss you too." And he did with an ache that surprised him. but not enough to step back from the precipice he was approaching. Not enough to let go of what he had started. "Soon," he said. "This will all be over soon." But even as he spoke, he wondered if anything would ever truly be the same again. The onyx stone sat on his desk, a reminder of his father's lessons about transformation under pressure. But what was he becoming? A force for justice, or something darker shaped by the very prejudice he sought to fight? The question lingered unanswered as he returned to his work, the night stretching ahead, the path forward clear, but the destination increasingly uncertain. The final showdown was set for an extraordinary general meeting, a special shareholder meeting called for the purpose of the vote. It was to be held in a grand ballroom at the Savoy Hotel in London, a place that reeked of the very old-world establishment Marcus was seeking to dismantle. 1 week before the meeting, Marcus traveled to London. It was his first time in the city since the fateful day he was supposed to land there months ago. The irony wasn't lost on him as the plane touched down at Heathrow, the gentle bump of the landing gear against British soil, a reminder of the journey not taken and the one that had replaced it. He checked into the Connaught Hotel not far from Lord Preston's Mayfair office. It was a symbolic choice, positioning himself in the heart of old money London, a territory that men like Preston considered their exclusive domain. The hotel suite was a cocoon of luxury with its marble bathroom plush carpets and attentive service, but Marcus found no comfort in it. He stood at the window looking out at the rain-slicked streets of Mayfair, the elegant Georgian facades glowing softly in the evening light, and felt like an invader preparing for conquest. His first meeting was with Victoria Banks. They met not in a corporate boardroom or a fancy restaurant, but in the quiet corner of a small art gallery in Kensington. It was neutral ground away from the prying eyes of the financial press that had been following the takeover battle with rabid interest. The gallery was nearly empty on this weekday afternoon, their footsteps echoing softly against polished concrete floors, the modern installations creating a landscape of shadow and light around them. Victoria was tall and striking with short silver hair and the confident bearing of someone who had fought her way into rooms where she wasn't initially welcome. At 58, she had decades of business experience, including a successful turnaround of a luxury goods company that had caught GHG's attention, leading to acquisition and her board seat. "I've been studying your proposal in detail," she said after they had exchanged greetings, her voice carrying just enough to be heard over the gallery's ambient music, but not enough to reach the few other visitors. "It's impressive, comprehensive, but I still have questions." "I'd be disappointed if you didn't," Marcus replied. They walked slowly through the gallery, discussing his plans for GHG in hushed tones amidst contemporary art installations, abstract canvases, twisted metal sculptures, video projections that cast moving shadows across their faces. "The hotel chain needs investment, not divestment," she said, pausing before a large canvas of deep blues and blacks. "The brand has value, but the properties are tired." "I agree. My intention is to keep and revitalize the hotels. It's the shipping division that's the anchor dragging everything down." She nodded. "And Zenith Airlines?" A flicker of something cold passed behind Marcus's eyes, his reflection momentarily visible in the glass covering a nearby photograph. "Zenith requires a complete overhaul. New leadership, new culture, new training programs." Victoria studied him, her gaze shrewd and assessing. "This is personal for you, isn't it? Something happened with Zenith." Marcus had not shared the original incident with her. Their discussions had been purely business-focused until now. He considered deflecting, but decided on honesty. In the stark gallery lighting with art that spoke of both beauty and discomfort surrounding them, pretense seemed pointless. "Yes," he said simply. "I was removed from a Zenith flight in a manner that was discriminatory. The company's response was inadequate." "I see." She was quiet for a moment, her fingers lightly touching the frame of a nearby photograph, a stark black and white image of hands reaching through bars. "I've been the only woman in too many boardrooms, Mr. Reynolds. The only black person in even more. I know what it's like to be looked at differently, to be held to different standards, to be questioned when others aren't. It's never just one incident. It's the accumulation of 1,000 small cuts." Exactly. They stopped before a large abstract canvas, all blacks and deep blues with a single streak of white cutting across the darkness like lightning in a night sky. "Lord Preston represents a dying order," Victoria said, gazing at the painting. "Old money, old connections, old thinking. He views GHG as his birthright, not as a public company with responsibilities to shareholders and employees. But taking him down won't be easy. He still has allies. Are you one of them?" She turned to face him directly, the overhead spotlight creating dramatic shadows across her face. "I believe in results, Mr. Reynolds. In the 18 months I've been on this board, I've watched Preston dismiss good ideas because they didn't come from his circle. I've seen him appoint his hunting buddies' sons to executive positions, and I've witnessed the slow decline of what could be a great company. So no, I am not his ally." She extended her hand. "You have my support, on one condition. Name it. When this is over, when you're in charge, remember why you started this. Not just the personal slight, but the principle. Build something better, not just different." Marcus took her hand, feeling the strength in her grip, seeing in her eyes the same determination that drove him. "You have my word." The alliance was formed. With Victoria Banks publicly supporting his bid, other board members began to waver. 2 more directors privately reached out to Marcus expressing concerns about Preston's leadership and interest in a new direction. The momentum was building, but Preston wasn't going down without a fight. The next day, the Financial Times carried a full-page advertisement from Global Heritage Group. It was an open letter to shareholders signed by Lord Preston appealing to tradition, stability, and British values. It painted Marcus as an opportunistic outsider seeking to dismantle a century of heritage for quick profit. The heavy cream-colored paper and formal language seemed designed to evoke a bygone era of gentlemanly capitalism. Marcus read it over breakfast in his hotel suite, amused rather than angered. Preston was fighting the last war, appealing to sentiments that might have worked in his father's time, but rang hollow in today's global financial markets. Shareholders cared about returns, not rhetoric. His phone buzzed with the message from Sophia back in New York. Reuters reporting Elizabeth Monroe has released video of your removal from Zenith flight. Going viral. Check your email. Marcus opened his laptop and clicked on the video link Sophia had sent. There it was. The entire humiliating episode captured by the fashion model's phone. Patricia Wilson's condescension, her posture stiff with authority, her voice carrying clearly over the cabin noise. Captain Blackwell's dismissal barely looking at Marcus as he delivered his verdict. Marcus's own dignified exit, his back straight, his face a mask of control. The video had already been viewed over 2 million times in just a few hours. Below it was a post from Elizabeth Monroe's Instagram. Months ago, I witnessed this disgraceful treatment of a first-class passenger on @Zenith Airlines. Now I discover he's Marcus Reynolds, the billionaire trying to take over their parent company. Karma is real, folks. First-class justice. The hashtag was trending. The court of public opinion was in session, and the verdict wasn't looking good for Zenith or GHG. Marcus closed the video, unexpectedly shaken by seeing the incident from an external perspective. In his memory, it had taken on the quality of a bad dream, vivid but somehow distant. Seeing it play out on screen made it real again, the humiliation fresh as the day had happened. Richard Hargrove Zenith's CEO was in full crisis mode. His corner office, once a sanctuary of corporate power, now felt like a bunker under siege. He issued a statement pledging a full investigation into the incident and promising appropriate action. Too little, too late. Captain Blackwell was quietly removed from flight duty and placed on administrative leave. Patricia Wilson called in sick, her absence noted in the crew scheduling system with a simple code that gave no hint of the storm surrounding her. The tide was turning. What had begun as a corporate takeover battle was now taking on the dimensions of a public reckoning. It wasn't just about management efficiency or shareholder value anymore. It was about accountability, about consequences, about justice. Marcus closed his laptop and walked to the window looking out at the London skyline, the ancient spires of churches mingling with the glass and steel towers of modern finance. The great city had been built on empire, on the unearned privileges of men like Preston. But times were changing. Power was shifting, and Marcus Reynolds was the instrument of that change. His phone rang. It was Michael Townsend. The proxy advisory firms have issued their recommendations, his lawyer said without preamble. ISS and Glass Lewis are both supporting our slate of directors. They specifically cited the pension fund mismanagement and Preston's failure to adapt to modern governance standards. This was a crucial development. The two largest proxy advisory firms had enormous influence over how institutional investors voted their shares. Their endorsement all but guaranteed victory. "It's over," Michael continued, excitement making his voice higher than usual. "Preston just doesn't know it yet." But Marcus wasn't celebrating. "It's not over until the votes are counted. Preston still has one card to play: fear. He'll try to scare the British government into blocking the takeover on national security grounds or some such nonsense. Make sure our London legal team is prepared." As if on cue, his other phone, the secure line used only for Project Eclipse communications, rang. It was Sophia. "You called it?" she said, not bothering with greetings. "Preston's playing the nationalism card. He's meeting with the business secretary this afternoon. They're discussing whether GHG's shipping division is a strategic national asset that should be protected from foreign ownership." Marcus smiled grimly, the reflection in the window showing a harder version of himself than he remembered. Predictable. Get our lobbyists on it, and release our contingency statement about keeping all UK operations intact and expanding British employment. Already done. Also, Lord Preston is calling an emergency board meeting tonight. Victoria says it's a desperation move. He's going to try to issue new shares to friendly parties to dilute our stake. He can't do that without shareholder approval. He's going to try anyway. Victoria will oppose it, but she needs backup. Marcus checked his watch, the Patek Philippe gleaming against his wrist. "I'll be there. Not in the room, but nearby. Tell Victoria to keep her phone on. This ends tonight." The emergency board meeting was held at GHG's headquarters, a stately stone building in the heart of London's financial district. Marcus waited in a car across the street, the leather seats cool beneath him, the city lights reflecting off the rain-slicked streets outside. He was on a secure line with Victoria Banks as the drama unfolded inside. He could picture the scene, the wood-paneled boardroom, the portrait of Lord Preston's father watching over the proceedings, the tension thick enough to cut. Preston would be at the head of the table, his authority already diminished, but his desperation making him dangerous. Victoria would be calm, composed her arguments, rational and devastating. Preston was indeed attempting a last-ditch maneuver to maintain control, proposing a poison pill that would make the takeover prohibitively expensive. But he hadn't counted on the level of dissent within his own ranks. Victoria, armed with legal opinions provided by Marcus's team, led the opposition. The measure failed to pass, with 4 directors voting against it, including 2 who had been Preston loyalists just a week earlier. "It's done," Victoria texted after the meeting. "He's finished. He knows it now." The next morning, Lord William Preston called Marcus Reynolds directly. It was the first direct communication between the two men. Mr. Reynolds Preston's voice was clipped, his aristocratic accent pronounced. "I believe it's time we met face to face. I agree, Lord Preston. My club, Brooks's. Noon today. Marcus smiled at the predictability. Brooks's was one of London's oldest, most exclusive gentlemen's clubs, a bastion of aristocratic privilege where men like Preston felt secure in their status. It was a place where women weren't allowed until recently, and where black members were still a rarity. "No," Marcus replied calmly. "The Connaught Hotel. My suite. 1 hour." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, the silence heavy with the weight of shifting power. "Very well," Preston finally said the words seeming to cause him physical pain. Exactly 1 hour later, Lord William Preston stood in Marcus's hotel suite looking distinctly uncomfortable. He was tall and thin, with the ruddy complexion of a man who spent weekends hunting on his country estate. His suit was bespoke but old-fashioned, his tie a club pattern that probably signified membership in some exclusive institution. He carried an umbrella despite the fact that it had stopped raining, its polished wooden handle gleaming in the suite's soft lighting. "Drink," Marcus offered, gesturing to the bar cart in the corner. "No, thank you." Preston remained standing, though Marcus had gestured to a chair, his posture rigid with a lifetime of ingrained superiority now being tested. "I'll be brief. You've mounted an impressive campaign, Mr. Reynolds. Ruthless, but impressive. I'm prepared to offer you a compromise. I'm listening." Marcus remained standing as well, unwilling to cede even the psychological advantage of height to Preston. "A seat on the board. 2 seats even. A significant say in the company's direction. In return, you support my continued chairmanship and cease this proxy fight." Marcus studied the older man, seeing the desperation behind the forced dignity, the slight tremor in his hand as he gripped his umbrella. "That's not a compromise, Lord Preston. That's a surrender on my terms rather than yours. The outcome is the same. You lose control. The only difference is the public spectacle." Preston's face hardened, the veneer of civility cracking to reveal the anger beneath. "Do you have any idea what this company means to my family? 3 generations of Prestons have guided Global Heritage. My grandfather founded it. My father expanded it, and I've preserved it through wars, recessions, and political upheavals. It's not just a corporation. It's a legacy. A legacy of what Marcus asked quietly, the question hanging in the air between them. Of privilege without accountability, of power without responsibility, of treating people as less than because they don't belong to your club. You don't understand. No, you don't understand." Marcus cut him off, his voice still calm but edged with steel. "This isn't about your family name or your heritage. It's about results. It's about the thousands of employees whose pensions you've endangered, the shareholders whose value you've squandered, and the culture of disrespect you've fostered throughout your organization. It's about consequences." Preston's face flushed with anger, the red creeping up from his collar to his cheeks. "Is this all because of that incident on the airline? Is that what this is about? Some perceived slight by a flight attendant?" Marcus stood very still, his eyes locked on Preston's. In that moment he felt a strange doubling. Part of him was the calculating CEO executing a perfectly planned takeover, but another part was still the man who had been humiliated on that plane, the man who had been told his bag was suddenly a safety hazard when identical bags around him were not. It wasn't perceived. It was real. And it wasn't just a flight attendant. It was your airline, your company, your culture. A culture that begins at the top with men who believe their position exempts them from common decency. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of history. Not just the personal history between these 2 men, but the larger history of power and its abuses of prejudice and its consequences. "The meeting is tomorrow," Marcus continued. "You can fight to the bitter end and lose publicly, or you can announce your retirement this afternoon and salvage some dignity. Either way, at this time tomorrow, I will be the chairman of Global Heritage Group." Preston straightened his shoulders, a lifetime of aristocratic bearing asserting itself one last time. "You may win this battle, Mr. Reynolds, but remember, In trying to destroy me, you might become what you despise. Power changes people, usually not for the better." With that, he turned and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Marcus remained standing in the center of the room, Preston's words echoing in his mind. Was the old man right? In his quest for justice, was he at risk of becoming the very thing he was fighting against? The entitled, the untouchable, the wielder of power without restraint. He took out the onyx stone from his pocket, turning it over in his hand, feeling its smooth surface, remembering his father's words about transformation under pressure. What was he becoming? A force for positive change, or just another kind of tyrant using different weapons but the same destructive intent? He pushed the thought aside. There would be time for reflection later. Now was the time for action, for victory, for the reckoning that had been building since that moment on the plane when Patricia Wilson had first questioned his right to exist in a space he had legitimately earned. Tomorrow the scales would balance. Justice, or something like it, would be served. That afternoon, Lord William Preston called a press conference. The room was packed with journalists, the air heavy with anticipation and the smell of coffee and electronics. Camera flashes created a strobe effect as Preston approached the podium, the GHG logo prominently displayed behind him. Standing before a forest of microphones, looking pale but composed in a perfectly tailored Navy suit, he announced his retirement from Global Heritage Group effective immediately. He cited personal reasons and a desire to spend more time with family. He avoided any mention of Marcus Reynolds or the proxy fight. It was a surrender dressed up as a dignified exit. But everyone in the financial world knew the truth. The old guard had fallen. The only question remaining was what would rise in its place. With Preston's resignation, the extraordinary general meeting the next day took on a different character. Instead of a battle, it would now be a coronation. Marcus's slate of directors was virtually guaranteed approval. Richard Hargrove, the CEO of Zenith Airlines, watched these developments with mounting horror. His attempts to reach Marcus had been rebuffed, calls and emails going unanswered. His frantic calls to GHG board members went unreturned. He was watching his career implode in slow motion, powerless to stop it. That evening, Hargrove sat alone in his New York office, the Manhattan skyline spread out before him in all its indifferent glory. The office had once felt like a kingdom. His corner suite, with its custom furniture and spectacular views, a testament to his success. Now it felt like a prison cell, the walls closing in with each new development. A glass of scotch in his hand, he stared at the complaint letter from Marcus Reynolds that he had so casually dismissed months ago, the cursor blinking accusingly on his computer screen. The $500 voucher now seemed like a sick joke, a punchline to a story that would define his career forever, the CEO who tried to buy off a billionaire with pocket change. He had misread the situation so completely, failing to recognize that the difficult passenger his crew had ejected was a man with both the resources and the resolve to rewrite the entire corporate structure above him. His phone rang. It was Patricia Wilson, the senior flight attendant, who had set this disaster in motion. Her voice came through the speaker, thin and strained. "Mr. Hargrove," her voice was shaky. "The video of the incident with that passenger is everywhere. I'm getting death threats online. People are calling for me to be fired. The company needs to defend me." "I was just following procedures." Hargrove closed his eyes, suppressing the urge to scream. He took a long swallow of scotch, the burn in his throat, a welcome distraction from the catastrophe unfolding around him. What procedures exactly, Miss Wilson? The ones about harassing first-class passengers about their properly stowed bags. The ones about making assumptions based on appearance. Those procedures, that's not fair. I was ensuring cabin safety. No, you weren't. He cut her off, his voice rising. You were exercising petty authority because you could. And now we're all paying the price. I'm sorry about the threats. Truly. But Zenith can't defend your actions because they were indefensible. He hung up, drained his scotch, and began drafting his resignation letter, the words blurring slightly as he typed. There was no scenario in which Marcus Reynolds, as the new chairman of GHG, would allow him to remain in his position. Better to leave on his own terms than be publicly fired. Meanwhile, in London, Marcus was dining with Victoria Banks and the core team from Project Eclipse, who had flown in for the shareholder meeting. They sat in a private room at a high-end restaurant, the soft lighting and muted conversations creating an atmosphere of contained celebration. The chef had prepared a special menu, each course more exquisite than the last, paired with wines from the restaurant's legendary cellar. Yet Marcus found himself barely tasting the food, his mind already racing ahead to tomorrow, to the next phase of his plan. Preston's resignation changes everything, Sophia said, sipping her wine, the candlelight catching the subtle highlights in her dark hair. It's a clear path now. The institutional investors who were on the fence will fall in line. The vote tomorrow is a formality. Don't underestimate their capacity for resistance, Marcus warned, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. Old power doesn't die easily, it just changes form. Speaking of resistance, Michael Townsend interjected, checking his phone under the table, the blue glow illuminating his face from below. Richard Hargrove just announced his resignation as CEO of Zenith, effective immediately. Rats fleeing the sinking ship, someone commented with a laugh. No, Marcus corrected, setting down his fork with a soft clink against fine china. It's strategic. He's trying to make himself a less obvious target, hoping to fade into the background before we can hold him accountable. Will it work? Sophia asked, studying Marcus over the rim of her wine glass. Marcus took a sip of water. He hadn't touched his wine all evening, maintaining the clarity he would need for tomorrow. No. Later that night, alone in his hotel suite, Marcus received an unexpected call. It was Dr. Vanessa Patel. Her voice a welcome connection to a world that suddenly seemed far away. I just saw the news about Preston stepping down, she said. Congratulations. You did it. Almost. The vote is tomorrow, but the outcome isn't in doubt anymore. There was a pause, the line humming softly with static. How does it feel, Marcus considered the question, looking out at the London night, the city spread before him like a tapestry of lights. How did it feel? The anger that had driven him for months had receded, replaced by something else. Not quite satisfaction, but a complex mix of vindication and hollow victory. Incomplete, he finally answered. That's telling, Vanessa observed. Most people would be celebrating, planning the victory party. It's not about the victory, it's about the change. And what changes are you planning beyond the obvious corporate restructuring? Again. Marcus paused, weighing his thoughts, trying to articulate the vision that had driven him through this entire campaign. I want to build something better, not just a more profitable company, but a more just one. A place where another Marcus Reynolds wouldn't be ejected from a plane for existing in the wrong skin. That's a worthy goal, Vanessa said softly. Just remember what we discussed. Justice and vengeance may begin at the same place, but they lead to very different destinations. I remember. Good. Now what about Alicia? Have you spoken to her? The question caught him off guard. He hadn't called Alicia in days, consumed as he was with the final stages of the takeover. The realization brought a pang of guilt. I'll call her after tomorrow, he said. When it's done. Don't wait too long, Marcus. Some victories aren't worth the cost. After they hung up, Marcus stood by the window looking out at the London night, the ancient city sleeping beneath a blanket of lights and shadows. Tomorrow would bring the formal confirmation of his victory. He would become chairman of a $25 billion global company with the power to reshape its culture, its priorities, its very identity. But at what cost Alicia's love, his own peace of mind, the principles that had guided Onyx Capital since its founding? He thought of his father, of the lessons William Reynolds had taught him about dignity in the face of prejudice, about excellence as the best revenge. What would his father think of the path he had chosen? of the lines he had crossed. The onyx stone sat on the nightstand, gleaming dully in the low light. He picked it up, feeling its familiar weight and coolness against his palm. "What am I becoming?" "Dad," he whispered to the empty room, the question hanging unanswered in the darkness. The day of the extraordinary general meeting dawned bright and clear, a rarity for London in autumn. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Savoy Hotel's grand ballroom, illuminating the ornate ceiling and crystal chandeliers. The room was packed with shareholders, journalists, and financial analysts, all eager to witness the formal transfer of power. The air buzzed with conversation and anticipation, the scent of coffee and expensive perfumes mingling in the warm air. This was the arena where corporate titans battled, where fortunes were made and lost, where power changed hands, not with violence, but with votes and handshakes. Marcus arrived early, impeccably dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that fit him like armor. His tie, a deep onyx black with subtle texture, was secured with a simple silver pin, understated elegance that spoke of confidence rather than flash. He moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, accompanied by Sophia, Michael, and Victoria. They acknowledged greetings but engaged in no lengthy conversations. This was not a time for small talk. The remaining GHG board members were already seated on the stage, looking subdued in their dark suits and somber expressions. Lord Preston's chair remained empty, a visual reminder of the upheaval that had already taken place. The interim chairman, a long-serving board member named Jeffrey Hamilton, would preside over the meeting until the new board was confirmed. At precisely 10 a.m., Hamilton called the meeting to order, the tap of his gavel echoing through the suddenly quiet ballroom. The formalities were brief: a reading of the agenda, a confirmation of the quorum, and then the main business, the vote on the proposed slate of directors. "As you are all aware," Hamilton said, his voice carrying a slight tremor, the microphone adding a metallic edge to his upper-class accent, "shareholders have been asked to vote on a new board of directors proposed by Onyx Capital Partners, led by Mr. Marcus Reynolds, who currently holds a 28% stake in Global Heritage Group. The existing board has reviewed this proposal and, following Lord Preston's resignation, has decided not to oppose it." A murmur ran through the crowd, the soft rustle of expensive suits and dresses as people shifted in their seats. Even with Preston gone, this level of capitulation was unexpected. Therefore, Hamilton continued, gripping the podium as if for support. "Unless there are objections from the floor, the votes already submitted by proxy will be tallied and the results announced." There were no objections. The tally took less than 20 minutes, the tension in the room building with each passing moment. When Hamilton returned to the podium, his face told the story before he spoke, the resignation of a man witnessing the end of an era. The results are as follows. The proposed slate of directors has been approved with 78% of votes cast in favor. This includes all institutional shareholders and the majority of individual investors. Another murmur, louder this time, rippled through the ballroom. Not just a victory, but a landslide. The old order had not just been defeated, it had been repudiated. I therefore declare the new board of directors duly elected. Would the new members please come to the stage? Marcus and Victoria rose along with 7 other individuals who had been carefully selected for their expertise in various aspects of GHG's business. They took their places on the stage as the outgoing board members filed off, some nodding in respectful acknowledgement, others avoiding eye contact altogether, their footsteps heavy on the polished wood. Hamilton handed the gavel to Marcus with a stiff bow, the symbolic transfer of power complete. "The chair is yours, Mr. Reynolds." Marcus stepped to the podium, surveying the packed ballroom. This was the moment he had been planning for months, the culmination of a strategy set in motion by a single act of discrimination. He felt the weight of all eyes upon him, not just those in the room, but the global financial community watching via live stream, the employees of GHG worldwide, and most particularly the staff of Zenith Airlines. He stood in silence for a moment, the hush in the room growing deeper with each passing second. The sunlight streaming through the windows created a spotlight effect, illuminating him against the darker backdrop of the stage. Then he spoke, his voice clear and measured, carrying to every corner of the vast room. "Thank you, Mr. Hamilton, and thank you to all shareholders who have placed their trust in our vision for the future of Global Heritage Group." He paused, looking around the room, making eye contact with key institutional investors in the front rows. He could see curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases a guarded hope. For too long, this company has been managed as if it were a private fiefdom rather than a public corporation with responsibilities to its shareholders, its employees, and its customers. Under Lord Preston's leadership, GHG became a symbol of an outdated approach to business, one that valued connections over competence, tradition over innovation, and status over performance. He gestured to the new board members seated behind him, their diverse backgrounds a stark contrast to the homogeneity of the previous board. "The leadership team you see before you represents a different vision. We believe that excellence knows no background, that merit trumps pedigree, and that a company's culture flows from the top down. If the leaders of an organization tolerate discrimination, disrespect, or dishonesty at any level, that toxicity will spread throughout the entire structure." His voice hardened slightly, the words carrying a weight beyond their literal meaning. "I have experienced this toxicity firsthand, as some of you may know from recent media coverage. Several months ago, I was removed from a Zenith Airlines flight due to nothing more than the prejudice of a crew member and the complicity of a captain who found it easier to remove a passenger than to question his subordinate's judgment." Murmurs rippled through the audience as people connected the dots, heads turning, whispers exchanged. Many had seen the viral video, but hearing it acknowledged so directly by Marcus himself gave it new meaning. That incident was not an anomaly. It was a symptom of a culture that had lost its moral compass, a culture that will now change. He outlined his vision for GHG. The divestiture of underperforming assets, the investment in the hotel chain, and a reformed Zenith Airlines, the full funding of the pension plan, and most importantly, a complete overhaul of the company's approach to governance and ethics. The room was silent as he spoke, the only sound the occasional click of photographers' cameras and the scratch of journalists' pens. "This is not about destroying a legacy," he concluded, echoing the words from his letter to shareholders. "It is about building a new one, a legacy of excellence, of integrity, and of value. A legacy where the only thing that matters is performance, and where everyone from the boardroom to the jet bridge is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." He paused, letting his words settle over the assembled crowd, feeling the weight of the moment. "The choice before you was simple: to remain in the past or to step into the future. You have chosen the future. Thank you." The applause was hesitant at first, then growing stronger, spreading like a wave from the front of the room to the back, particularly from the section where the professional investors sat. These were people who cared about results, not rhetoric, and Marcus had just promised them both moral and financial returns. As the meeting adjourned and people began to file out, the buzz of conversation filling the room once more, Marcus found himself face to face with Jeffrey Hamilton, the outgoing interim chairman. Hamilton was old-school British business, his pinstriped suit and regimental tie markers of a certain class and generation, his silver hair perfectly groomed. Mr. Reynolds Hamilton said, extending his hand, his grip firm but not challenging. "A word of advice, if I may. GHG is more than a balance sheet. It's an institution. Respect that, even as you change it." Marcus shook the offered hand. "Institutions are only as worthy of respect as the values they embody, Mr. Hamilton. GHG lost sight of that under Lord Preston. I intend to restore it." Hamilton nodded, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "Fair enough. Good luck." As Hamilton walked away, his shoulders slightly stooped as if carrying the weight of the old order's defeat. Sophia appeared at Marcus's side, tablet in hand, already moving on to the next phase. "Victoria's organizing the first official board meeting for this afternoon. Richard Hargrove is requesting an urgent call with you. Decline, Marcus said flatly. His resignation has been accepted. There's nothing to discuss. And Captain Blackwell. Patricia Wilson. What happens to them? A cold smile touched Marcus's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. They'll find out soon enough. The formal transition of power was complete. Marcus Reynolds, the black investor who had been pulled from first class just months ago, was now the chairman of a global corporate empire that included the very airline that had humiliated him. The first phase of his plan was accomplished. Now came the real work, the reconstruction, the reformation, the justice. But as he stood on the stage of that grand ballroom, surrounded by the trappings of his victory, Marcus felt a curious emptiness. The rage that had fueled him for so long had burned down to embers, leaving behind a question he had not allowed himself to face. What kind of leader would he become? Would he use his new power to heal or to punish, to build or to destroy? For a brief moment, standing there amid the dispersing crowd, he felt a strange vertigo, as if he were both the Marcus Reynolds who had been ejected from that flight and the Marcus Reynolds who now controlled the company that owned the airline. Two versions of himself separated by months, but divided by something deeper, a transformation that went beyond position or power to touch the very core of who he was. The answer he knew would define not just the future of Global Heritage Group, but his own soul. The news of Marcus Reynolds' takeover of Global Heritage Group dominated financial headlines around the world. The story had everything: drama, irony, justice, and a compelling protagonist. The black investor removed from a first-class seat who returned to buy the entire airline and its parent company. It was a modern parable, a David and Goliath tale with a corporate twist. But the narrative was still being shaped, the battle for public opinion still raging. Lord Preston might have conceded the boardroom, but he wasn't surrendering the media battlefield. The day after the shareholder meeting, the Telegraph published an interview with Preston conducted at his family estate in the Cotswolds. The late afternoon sun bathed the ancient stone mansion in golden light, creating an almost mythic backdrop for Preston's last stand. The article was accompanied by a photograph of Preston standing before his ancestral home, looking dignified in country tweeds, the very picture of British tradition under assault. Mr. Reynolds talks about performance and value. Preston was quoted as saying, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed across the manicured gardens that had been in his family for generations. But what value does he place on heritage, on continuity, on the thousands of British jobs that may be at risk under American ownership? This isn't just about quarterly profits. It's about the soul of a company that has been a cornerstone of British business for a century. Marcus read the article over breakfast in his hotel suite, sunlight streaming through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. He found himself amused, rather than angered, by Preston's attempt to wrap his personal defeat in the Union Jack. It was a transparent play for public sympathy and potential government intervention, but it wouldn't work. The financial case for change was too strong and Preston's record too weak. Sophia, who was coordinating the PR response from New York, had already arranged for a thoughtful rebuttal to be published in the Financial Times. It highlighted Marcus's plans to invest in GHG's British operations, create new jobs, and fully fund the pension scheme that Preston had neglected. The contrast between Preston's emotional appeals and Marcus's concrete plans couldn't have been more stark. But the most powerful counterpoint came from an unexpected source. Elizabeth Monroe, the fashion model who had recorded Marcus's removal from the Zenith flight, released the full unedited video to major media outlets. Unlike the brief clip that had gone viral earlier, this version captured the entire incident from beginning to end, the cabin lights creating harsh shadows that emphasized the tension of the confrontation. It showed Patricia Wilson's initial approach, her tone shifting from professional to condescending as she realized Marcus wasn't lost but actually belonged in first class. It captured her fixation on his briefcase while ignoring identical ones. It recorded Captain Blackwell's dismissive attitude, barely making eye contact with Marcus as he delivered his verdict. And most damningly, it caught Patricia's muttered comment, "It's always people like him." The video spread like wildfire across social media, accompanied by the hashtag #FirstClassJustice. Commentators and celebrities weighed in, almost universally condemning Zenith's handling of the situation and praising Marcus's response as proportionate and justified. CNN invited Marcus for an interview, but he declined, preferring to let the video and his actions speak for themselves. His silence in the face of growing public support only enhanced his mystique, the quiet, dignified businessman who let his results do the talking. Meanwhile, Richard Hargrove, the former CEO of Zenith Airlines, was attempting to reshape his own narrative. In an interview with Aviation Weekly conducted in a sterile conference room at a midtown Manhattan hotel, he portrayed himself as a victim of circumstances caught between an unfortunate customer service incident and a billionaire's wounded pride. "Of course, I regret how Mr. Reynolds was treated." Hargrove set his tie slightly crooked, dark circles under his eyes, betraying the stress of recent weeks. But to use that isolated incident as justification for a complete corporate takeover seems excessive. There are established channels for addressing customer complaints that don't involve buying the company. The attempt at damage control backfired spectacularly when an anonymous source leaked emails showing that Hargrove had been informed of multiple discrimination complaints against Patricia Wilson in the past, all of which had been dismissed without serious investigation. The emails included one from Hargrove himself, referring to such complaints as the usual diversity noise that was bad for morale. The leak effectively ended any hope Hargrove had of rehabilitation. His resignation, which he had hoped would allow him to slip away quietly instead, became the prelude to a very public disgrace. Captain Robert Blackwell fared slightly better, maintaining a low profile and issuing a brief statement through his union representative expressing regret for the incident, but defending his prioritization of crew cohesion and flight safety. It was a weak defense, but absent further revelations, he might weather the storm. Patricia Wilson, however, found herself at the center of the maelstrom. As the most visible villain in the viral video, she became the focus of intense public scrutiny. Her social media accounts were flooded with angry messages, some merely critical, others containing threats that crossed all boundaries of decency. Several news outlets attempted to contact her for comment, but she remained in seclusion, reportedly on medical leave for stress. In London, Marcus convened the first official meeting of the new GHG board. The boardroom, with its mahogany table and leather chairs, still bore the vestiges of Preston's era. Oil paintings of past chairmen lining the walls, a grandfather clock ticking solemnly in the corner, the company's coat of arms displayed prominently. It would all need to change, but for now it served as a reminder of what they were transforming. The agenda was ambitious, restructuring the executive team, addressing the pension fund shortfall, planning the divestiture of the shipping division, and most importantly for Marcus, outlining the complete overhaul of Zenith Airlines. Victoria Banks, now elevated to lead independent director, watched Marcus with a mixture of admiration and concern as he methodically worked through each item. His focus was laser-sharp, his command of the details impressive. But there was also a coldness to him that hadn't been present in their earlier interactions, a hardness that suggested the victory had not brought him the satisfaction he had expected. After the meeting, as the other directors filed out discussions continuing in hushed tones, Victoria stayed behind. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished table, glinting off water glasses and the metal accents of leather portfolios. "Impressive start," she said. "You've clearly been planning this for months." "Planning is what I do," Marcus replied, gathering his papers, not meeting her eyes. "And execution." Victoria studied him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth. "The board unanimously approved your proposals for Zenith. Complete leadership overhaul, comprehensive anti-bias training, new customer service protocols. It's all necessary and overdue. But Marcus looked up, hearing the reservation in her tone. But I'm wondering about the personal aspect. Specifically what happens to Patricia Wilson and Captain Blackwell. Marcus's expression remained neutral, but his hands stilled for a moment before resuming their task. They'll be dealt with appropriately, meaning they'll face the consequences of their actions, just as Lord Preston has, just as Richard Hargrove has. Victoria leaned forward, her silver hair catching the sunlight, creating a momentary halo effect. Marcus, you have the opportunity to show what kind of leader you really are. Compassion can be as powerful a message as consequence. They showed me no compassion. Marcus replied, a rare flash of emotion breaking through his composed exterior, his voice rising slightly before he controlled it again. No, they didn't. And they should be held accountable. But there's accountability, and then there's retribution. One heals, the other perpetuates the cycle. Marcus was silent, weighing her words, the ticking of the grandfather clock suddenly loud in the quiet room. Just consider it, Victoria said, rising to leave the leather chair, creaking softly beneath her. The true measure of power isn't what you can destroy. It's what you can build. After she left, Marcus stood alone in the boardroom, looking out over the London skyline. The city was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, the ancient and the modern coexisting in a landscape shaped by centuries of power. Kings and merchants, aristocrats and industrialists, all leaving their mark before passing into history. Now it was his turn to shape that landscape. The question was, what shape would it take? He took out his phone, scrolling through recent messages until he found the one he wanted, a text from earlier that day that he hadn't yet answered. It was from Alicia Saw, the news. So proud of you. When are you coming home? The word struck him with unexpected force, resonating in the empty boardroom. In his single-minded pursuit of this takeover, he had lost sight of what home meant. Not just a place, but a connection, a belonging, a center that held when everything else was in flux. He thought of his apartment in New York, its walls lined with books, the chess set always ready for a game, the kitchen where he and Alicia had spent so many evenings cooking together, laughing, arguing, living. He thought of Alicia herself, her intelligence and warmth, her ability to see him, really see him, when others saw only the successful CEO or the black man in spaces where he was still an exception. Soon he typed back, very soon, and for the first time in months, he meant it. The transformation of Global Heritage Group under Marcus Reynolds's leadership began immediately and proceeded with the precision that had become his trademark. Within the first week, he had appointed a new CEO, a respected British executive with experience in both the hotel and airline industries. The message was clear: GHG would remain a British company in operation, if not in ownership. The pension fund was fully funded, with Marcus personally guaranteeing the shortfall until the company's finances were restructured. This single act won him the support of thousands of GHG employees who had been quietly anxious about their retirement security under Preston's leadership. Word spread quickly through the company's offices and facilities, from the corporate headquarters in London to hotel properties across Europe, to Zenith's operations centers worldwide, that the new chairman's first priority had been to secure their futures. The shipping division was put up for sale, with 3 serious bidders emerging within days. The proceeds would be used to pay down debt and invest in the core businesses, the hotel chain and Zenith Airlines. But it was Zenith that received Marcus's most focused attention. The airline's headquarters in New York bore the signs of transformation. Construction crews renovating spaces, IT teams upgrading systems, new training programs being developed in conference rooms that once hosted routine meetings. The entire executive team was replaced, with Victoria Banks temporarily stepping in as CEO until a permanent replacement could be found. A comprehensive review of customer service policies was initiated with particular emphasis on non-discrimination and conflict resolution. The hashtag #FirstClassJustice had evolved from a social media phenomenon into a movement with people sharing their own stories of discrimination in travel hospitality and other service industries. Marcus, recognizing the power of this organic campaign, announced that Zenith would establish a First-Class Justice Initiative, a program to ensure equal treatment for all passengers regardless of race, gender, religion, or other characteristics. 2 weeks after taking control of GHG, Marcus returned to New York. The autumn air was crisp as he stepped out of the car in front of the Onyx Capital headquarters, the city's energy matching his own sense of accomplishment and anticipation. Sophia and the Project Eclipse team had prepared a welcome worthy of a conquering hero. Champagne congratulatory banners and a cake decorated with the GHG logo crossed out and replaced with the Onyx Capital emblem. The office buzzed with excitement, analysts and associates gathering to applaud as Marcus walked through the door, their faces alight with pride and admiration. But Marcus's first stop wasn't the office. It was Alicia's apartment in Tribeca. The mid-century building with its exposed brick and large windows had always felt more like home to him than his own larger, more impersonal space. He knocked on her door, heart pounding with an anxiety he hadn't felt since their first date 2 years ago. She opened the door, studying him with cautious eyes. He looked different, thinner, harder somehow, the months of intense focus having carved new lines around his eyes and mouth. His tailored suit hung slightly looser on his frame, evidence of meals skipped and sleep lost in pursuit of his goal. "You did it," she said simply, standing in the doorway, neither inviting him in nor sending him away. "I did. Was it worth it?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Was it worth the strain on their relationship? The countless canceled plans. The emotional distance that had grown between them. "I don't know yet," he answered honestly. "But I'm ready to find out. With you, if you'll still have me." Alicia stepped forward and took his hand, leading him into her apartment. The familiar scent of her home, fresh flowers, old books, the faint trace of the sandalwood candles she favored, enveloped him. On her coffee table was a chessboard, the pieces arranged in mid-game sunlight streaming through the windows to illuminate the black and white battlefield. "I've been practicing," she said with a small smile. "Thought I might need to understand the way your mind works a little better." Marcus felt something tight inside him begin to loosen like a knot slowly unwinding. This was what he had been missing. Not just Alicia, but the connection to a life beyond the takeover, beyond the revenge, beyond the cold satisfaction of victory. "I've missed you," he said, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. "I've missed you too." She squeezed his hand. "But I want to know. What happens now? With the airline? With the people who wronged you?" It was the same question Victoria had asked. The same question Marcus had been asking himself in the quiet hours of the night, lying awake in hotel rooms and on office couches, the weight of his new power, both exhilarating and terrifying. "That's what I'm still deciding," he admitted, moving to the window, looking out at the New York skyline, the city that had witnessed his rise. Part of me wants them to pay to feel the same humiliation, the same powerlessness. But another part knows that's not who you are. Alicia finished for him, coming to stand beside him, her reflection joining his in the window glass. "That's not who your father raised you to be." The mention of his father struck a chord resonating deep within him. William Reynolds had faced discrimination far worse than anything Marcus had experienced, yet had maintained his dignity, his humanity, his belief in justice rather than revenge. The onyx stone in Marcus's pocket seemed suddenly heavier. "He always said that how you treat people who have no power over you reveals your character," Marcus said quietly. "But how you treat people who wronged you when you gain power over them, that reveals your soul." Alicia nodded, her eyes meeting his in the reflection. "So what does your soul say?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume, feeling the warmth of her body against his. For the first time in months, he felt truly present, not plotting the next move, not calculating the next advantage, just existing in a moment of genuine connection. "My soul says it's time to build something, not just tear it down," he finally replied. The next day, Marcus convened a special meeting at Onyx Capital. The glass wall of Project Eclipse headquarters, once covered with Chart's financial data and the mementos of their campaign, was being cleared. The $500 voucher and dismissive letters that had fueled their mission were carefully removed, leaving a blank canvas. The space, which had been a war room, was being transformed into something new. The team gathered, unsure of what to expect, the air thick with curiosity and anticipation. Sophia stood beside Marcus, her usual composed demeanor tinged with an almost childlike excitement. "Project Eclipse is complete," Marcus announced to the assembled team, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "The sun has set on the old Global Heritage Group. Now it's time for a new dawn." He outlined his vision for the transformed company, not just more profitable, but more ethical, more inclusive, more accountable, a model of what modern business could be. As for the individuals involved in the incident that started all this, he continued feeling the weight of every eye upon him. They will face consequences, but proportionate ones. This isn't about punishment. It's about justice. Sophia raised an eyebrow, surprise flashing across her features. "Define proportionate." Richard Hargrove's resignation has been accepted. His severance has been reduced to the contractual minimum, and a portion of it will be donated to organizations promoting diversity in the aviation industry. The team nodded. That much had been expected. "Captain Blackwell. He's been offered a choice. Accept a demotion to training pilot, where he'll be responsible for teaching new pilots about conflict resolution and bias awareness, or take early retirement with a reduced package." He's chosen retirement. Again, no surprises. But then came the question everyone was waiting for. And Patricia Wilson. This was the question everyone was waiting for. The flight attendant who had set everything in motion with her prejudice. Marcus was silent for a moment. This decision had been the hardest, the one where the temptation for retribution had been strongest. He could still hear her voice. "It's always people like him. Ms. Wilson's employment has been terminated," he said finally. "However, I've learned that she has been caring for her mother, who has Alzheimer's. The medical bills are substantial. As part of her separation, Zenith will cover those medical expenses for the next year, giving her time to find new employment and stabilize her situation." The room was silent, processing this unexpected show of mercy. In return, Marcus continued, "She will participate in the development of Zenith's new anti-bias training program, sharing her perspective on how unconscious prejudice can affect customer interactions. Her experience will become a teaching tool." Sophia looked at him with new respect, a slow smile spreading across her face. "That's not what I expected." "It's not what I expected either," Marcus admitted. "But it's the right thing to do. Breaking the cycle requires more than just shifting who holds power. It requires changing how power is used." Later that afternoon, Marcus received a call from Victoria Banks in London. "I hear you've made your decisions regarding the Zenith staff," she said without preamble, her voice clear despite the transatlantic connection. "News travels fast. In boardrooms always. I wanted to say I'm impressed. Hargrove deserved what he got. But showing compassion to Wilson while still holding her accountable, that's leadership." It wasn't an easy decision, Marcus admitted, leaning back in his chair, watching the autumn sun cast long shadows across the Manhattan skyline. "The important ones never are." Victoria paused. "The board is unanimous in its support of your vision for GHG. We're announcing the new CEO for Zenith tomorrow, Gabriela Moreno from Spanish Airways. She has an excellent record on both performance and corporate culture. Good choice. One more thing, Victoria added. Lord Preston is selling his family estate in the Cotswolds. The financial press is speculating that he's in more serious financial trouble than anyone realized. Apparently, he had been using GHG as his personal piggy bank for years, with expenses that weren't properly documented. Without that source of funds, he's facing the consequences of his actions, Marcus finished. As we all do, eventually. After hanging up, Marcus sat at his desk contemplating the journey of the past months, from a humiliated passenger to the chairman of a global corporation, from a man consumed by righteous anger to one wrestling with the responsibilities of true power. The transformation wasn't complete, not of GHG and not of himself, but a corner had been turned. The pursuit of revenge had evolved into something more meaningful, a chance to create genuine, lasting change. His phone buzzed with a text from Alicia Dinner tonight. I know a place where they don't check your bag for being a safety hazard. Marcus smiled the first genuine smile in longer than he could remember. It's a date, he replied. The path forward was clear now. Not easy, but clear. He would rebuild Global Heritage Group in his own image, not as a vehicle for personal vengeance, but as a testament to what was possible when excellence met opportunity, when merit trumped prejudice, when justice prevailed over power. That evening, as he left his office, Marcus paused at the glass wall that had once housed Project Eclipse. It was empty now, awaiting a new purpose, a new mission. He placed a single item at its center, a black onyx stone polished to a mirror shine, a reminder of where he had come from and where he was going. 1 year after taking control of Global Heritage Group, Marcus Reynolds stood at the window of his London office watching a Zenith Airlines plane take off from Heathrow, its newly designed livery gleaming in the morning sun. The sleek lines of the aircraft represented more than just an updated brand. They symbolized a complete transformation. The airline had been reborn under his leadership like a phoenix rising from the ashes of its former self. The financial results had been equally impressive. By divesting the underperforming shipping division and focusing resources on the hotel chain and airline, Marcus had increased GHG's stock price by 42%. The pension fund was now overfunded, and employee satisfaction scores were at record highs. But the transformation hadn't been without its costs. Lord William Preston, once one of Britain's most prominent businessmen, had fallen far. The financial investigation that followed Marcus's takeover had uncovered years of questionable expenses and self-dealing that went beyond mere corporate excess. The new board had demanded repayment, leaving Preston financially ruined and socially ostracized. His family estate, once a symbol of generations of privilege, was now a luxury hotel operated by GHG. Richard Hargrove, the former CEO of Zenith Airlines, had become a pariah in the aviation industry. No major airline would touch him. He ended up as a consultant for a small, struggling cargo airline in the Midwest, a humiliating fall from grace that served as a cautionary tale in corporate America about the dangers of dismissing discrimination complaints. Captain Robert Blackwell had taken early retirement. His pilot's uniform packed away, his authority diminished. He spent his days on the golf course, a man who had commanded giant machines in the sky, now unable to command respect forever, knowing he had grounded his own career by deplaning the one man he shouldn't have. Patricia Wilson's story had taken a different turn, revealing the complex nature of justice in the real world. After her termination, she had participated in the development of Zenith's anti-bias training program, her initial defensiveness giving way to genuine reflection. The medical coverage for her mother had been a lifeline, and she eventually found a new position at a smaller airline where she worked with a new awareness of her own biases. But Marcus didn't revel in their downfall. He focused on the future. He poured hundreds of millions into Zenith Airlines, implementing the most rigorous, comprehensive diversity and respect training program in the industry. He established a scholarship fund for underprivileged students wanting to become pilots and aviation engineers. Under his leadership, GHG had become more profitable, more innovative, and a better place to work. 6 months after taking control, Marcus was flying to London on a Zenith Airlines A350, sitting in seat 2A. The cabin was staffed by a new generation of flight attendants, young, diverse, and professional. A young black flight attendant named Jasmine Taylor approached with a warm, genuine smile. "Mr. Reynolds," she said. "Welcome aboard. Can I get you a glass of champagne before we take off? Or perhaps you'd prefer something else?" Marcus looked at her at the professionalism and respect in her eyes, and then looked out the window at the twinkling lights of New York City below. He hadn't just bought an airline. He had bought the power to ensure that what happened to him would never happen again. The victory didn't taste sweet like revenge. It tasted like justice, quiet and absolute. "Water would be perfect, thank you," he said with a small smile. "Just water." As the plane reached cruising altitude, Marcus gazed out at the vast darkness, punctuated by the lights of cities far below. From this height, human divisions, of race, of class, of nationality, seemed absurdly small, irrelevant against the grandeur of the world they all shared. Yet those divisions had power. They shaped lives, limited possibilities, inflicted wounds that ran deep. His father had taught him to rise above prejudice, to be so good they can't ignore you. But Marcus now understood that wasn't enough. It wasn't sufficient to succeed despite the barriers. The barriers themselves needed to be dismantled. That was the true purpose of power, not to elevate oneself, but to lift others. Not to punish those who had wronged you, but to create a world where such wrongs were no longer possible. So what's the real lesson here? It's not just a story of revenge. It's a story about two kinds of power in this world. There's the temporary brittle power of a uniform or a title. The power to humiliate, to exclude, to enforce petty rules. Then there's true power, the power of capital, of strategy, and of unwavering will. The power to not just win the game, but to change the rules entirely. Marcus Reynolds didn't just want an apology. He wanted to create a world where one wasn't necessary. His story reminds us that justice isn't about punishment, but transformation. And sometimes the person you underestimate today could be the one transforming your world tomorrow. If this story of justice and transformation resonated with you, make sure to hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that challenge us to think differently about power, prejudice, and possibility. Leave a comment below about a time when you witnessed someone turn adversity into opportunity, or when you saw justice prevail in an unexpected way. Your stories inspire us all.